Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. And of course, this week we're talking about UFC 296. We wouldn't have it any other way. And we can't do it alone. When we're doing Bets and Banter, we got to bring in a sharp mind, a great guest to bounce these ideas off of. And we have none other than our boy Drahvy. By popular demand, he is back once again this week. Welcome back, my brother. Everybody had positive things to say last week, and we're very happy to welcome you back once again.
Hey, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me again. It's always fun to come on this show, and we have a banger of a card to discuss. So yeah, I can't wait. There's some bangers, and of course, there's money to be made as always. So gonna be fun.
Absolutely, man. Last card of the year for the UFC, and we want to make sure that we go out with a bang, of course. And when I'm looking at this card, I think it's tricky. I think there's a lot of landmines. I think there's some live underdogs as I look at the card as well. So I'm sitting back, I'm doing the old chin stroke and trying to find exactly where I'm going to unload these units for this week, but I'm also going to keep it very disciplined. I'm not going to overextend. Been doing very well on a nice little winning streak to close out the year. So I don't want to reach, I'm going to make sure that they're all bets that I truly believe in as we go along. But my man, without further ado, let's kick it off. We got the sharpest chat in the game that is only growing by the second here. It seems like people are starved for some fight content. I know there's been a lot of banger knockouts tonight in the world of regional MMA, in the world of, celebrity boxing and everything else going on. So without further ado, let's get it rolling, my man, with a heavyweight matchup. We've got Shamil Gaziev taking on Martin Buday in the preliminary matchup that will kick us off. And Shamil Gaziev, undefeated fighter, 11-0. One thing that stands out right away, very rare to see, a fighter with a name like that, right? That's an undefeated fighter being booked at plus 155 or whatever it was earlier in the week, right? So we've obviously seen massive contraction, and that's almost to be expected. I feel like with a line like this, people are going to find it hard to ignore a guy from Dagestan by way of Bahrain that's got some wrestling skills on paper, that was recruited by Abdul Manap. I don't even know how much people know the backstory there, but I do think that there are also some red flags that people have pointed out this week. The fact that, most of his fights end pretty early on. Most of his fights have been against a lower level of competition. And on the other side, you've got Martin Buday, who hasn't been fighting, a cream of the crop, let's say, in the UFC. But what we have seen from him is a consistency over 15 minutes, right? An ability to just go out there, push a pace, throw over 100 significant strikes in the heavyweight division. But the thing that stood out to me from the stats standpoint in this matchup was the fact that he's absorbing over 5 significant strikes per minute at heavyweight, which seems like a potentially bad idea against a guy like Shamil. So when I'm looking at this, it feels like a matchup with a lot of volatility. I feel like the line correction was probably sharp. It should have been a little bit closer line. But I also think that ABCs say always bet on cardio. And I do think over the long 15 minutes here, I would see Buday taking over the fight. So for me, tricky fight. Probably missed the best of it if I wanted to be on the dog anyway. How do you feel about this matchup, Drahvy? And do you think there's any bets worth getting involved with?
Yeah, I was a part of the early line movement, Liam, on this one. I got Gaziev at plus 160. I thought he was the side early. Now I don't like the line anymore. Like you said, the cardio is a concern. He's very dangerous, and I think that's one thing I'm going to talk about. If you look at Buday last fights, right? Yeah, he won a lot of fight in the UFC, but Chris Barnett undersized, right? Decision. I mean, technical decision. He technically win by knockout, but yeah. Bresky undersized a little bit. That was a split. A lot of people said that he should have lost that fight. Collier, a middleweight that blew off to to heavyweight. Yes, so undersized. And then Parisian is a heavyweight, but it's not dangerous. So my other point is these dudes are not dangerous. Like they're not good finisher. They don't hit as hard. And Buday is very hittable. Like you said, he's very hittable against smaller dude at heavyweight. But I think in this matchup, he can't be that hittable like he is. But I don't expect him to change his style for this matchup in particular. So with that being said, Gaziev, like you said, he has suspect cardio, but I think he has a lot of finishing upside early in the fight. And he hit very hard. He's probably one of the biggest hitter that Buday has fought. And Buday is hittable, right? So when you have a heavyweight fight with a guy that is more dangerous, that is undefeated, more power, and I think some potentially wrestling upside, I have to take it. I think he's the rightful favorite in this spot, Liam. but the line was just too wide at me at first. The UFC debut for Gaziev, we don't know how he's gonna fight, right? I've seen him go late into some fights, like that was sloppy, but he still won some decision, right? I think he won one or two, one decision in his career, but that was a low pace fight, and I think this fight's not gonna be a low pace fight, and I think they're gonna go at it. And everybody fight, like the Collier fight, for example, he slowed down himself. Like he has good cardio for heavyweight, but he does slow down. And I think that if the shot that come at him are harder, I really think that Gaziev has more finishing upside. But maybe we just see Buday surviving the first round and taking over as the fight goes on to get a late finish or maybe win a decision. But yeah, I just prefer to get the more dangerous fighter, the undefeated fighter, at plus money in his debut, and I think he has some good ceiling in the UFC. So give me Gaziev to win. Plus money is a good bet, but plus 105, it's a little bit short now with the UFC debut and his cardio concerns. So plus 160, that was a very good bet in my opinion.
Yeah, man, you absolutely crushed the line movement here. I was mentioning to you before the show, there's still some work that I have to do on my own spreadsheets and the documents that I make each and every week to try and give myself the best edge on the market. But I did get it done in terms of the prelims here. And I had in my tracker, Gaziev round one, which is as high as plus 460 in some places on the domestic market. On sharp markets, it's as low as plus 275. And I always look for certain patterns, right, in how fights are booked. And when you're seeing an underdog that's being heavily favored in the rounds one market, it's like, well, boy, even if I like this guy, maybe I wait to bet live on the Buday side, for example, right? Because then I get to avoid the chance that he gets nuked in round one. And let's imagine he loses the first round. Well, now I get a great price on a guy that I think might have the better cardio to come back. I think this might be a better live betting opportunity if you're on the Buday side, but I agree with you, man. The things that stood out to me about Gaziev on the Contender series before that matchup with Velasco, I just thought he was the way more dangerous guy on the feet. I actually said I recommended betting Gaziev sub and the fight ends by sub. And the reason being, you just see a guy like Gaziev make some mistakes on the ground. He's not a natural fighter. It wasn't his whole life doing it, but he's an athlete. And you could tell that he just has a good ability to recover when he's in bad spots. I thought that the reason he looked so gassed after that fight on Contender Series was that he panicked when Greg Velasco took his back. Greg is actually a good grappler, was dangerous in that spot. And I thought that was his whole path to winning the fight. But he was already rocked by the time he got his back. And I think that contributed to him getting out so easily. So for me, Gaziev's still a little bit of a work in progress, but man, 11-0 hasn't let you down yet. And a big plus money price to find out against a guy in Buday who has been getting the UFC experience, but admittedly, it's been about as low level UFC experience as you can get. So let's find out. And I think it's a great matchup. And clearly with the closing line value you've accrued, you did your job accordingly. But let's move to this next one, my man. We got a fun matchup between Andre Fili and Lucas Almeida. I was watching the face-offs just before we got on the air here. This is one that stands out, right? Andre Fili, always a nice guy, a gentleman, pretty classy fighter, comes out there with that hand extended. He realized Lucas Almeida wanted no part of that. So I do think there's going to be some heat on this one. Guys that typically might go to decision in an Andre Fili against the opposite, right? Lucas Almeida is a killer be killed type of archetype, typically throughout his career, doing more of the killing than the getting killed. But last time out against Pat Sabatini, that was a brutal beatdown. So, my man, we'll kick this one over to you first. How do you feel about this matchup? And what do you think about the face-off dynamic? Does that make you feel a little more bullish on violence here?
Yeah, especially because I'm on the under, Liam. So when I saw that fight, that face-off was like even better, right? One thing that also stuck out about this face-off, Philly is a big dude for featherweight, right? We used to see him being bigger in the cage most of the time. Just for example, his last fight against Wood, like he was the bigger guy, and sometimes he's the one who hit harder. Another example is the Bilalgio fight. He hit harder and stuff like that. But in this fight, he's gonna be a little bit smaller, and he's not gonna be the hardest hitter, And I also think one thing to mention is his chin. I don't think he's like very chinny, but I think his chin's a little bit of a concern, and especially in this matchup with a guy like Almeida. We know that he's gonna bring the heat, and we know that he hit hard, he can crack, and we know that Philly can get cracked, right? Also to note, he tends to fight it very close to his level of competition, Andrew Fili. When he goes the distance, sometimes it's split decision, and he doesn't distance himself. So it's not really a guy that I like to back at chalk like that, especially against a dangerous opponent. I actually bet Fili in his last two fights. He was close to a pick 'em, I think, with Algio, and he was plus a big underdog against Wood, right? I think that was a very good fight. I think Wood was the rightful winner, but very close. Yeah, in this fight, I think it's gonna be if Fili's gonna wrestle or not. I think that's the question. And I don't want to find out at minus 155 if he's gonna try to wrestle, because we have seen Almeida struggle with takedowns. We have seen him struggle with just his ground game in general. He's supposedly a black belt, but I know that Fili is not Sabatini, but I think he can then take down there if he wants. So I understand why he's the favorite with the UFC experience, with the cardio, with he's very good Fili, but like I said, his chin can get cracked and he kind of underperform at times. So I feel like they're gonna go at it. I don't trust Fili to wrestle, and I think at some point Almeida's gonna crack him. So if it go the distance, probably gonna be close. Maybe Fili has some upside with wrestling. So I played it under 2.5. I think I got it at a pick'em minus 115. It was, and also play Almeida decision no action, because I favor Fili in the decision, and I love to get my money back if you go the distance. And you have the finish prop on a guy like Almeida. So the finish, they opened it on Bet Online. It was minus 120. Almeida scorecard no action. I think that was a good bet. And yeah, so that's what I have here. I'm gonna pick Almeida to get a KO at some point. But I think that's going to be a good fight.
Yeah, man. The only money line I would probably consider in this one is Almeida. But the more I dug into it, the more I kind of lean towards violence, right? And I actually felt that way to start. Then I started leaning towards Almeida. And then I dig in more, and I'm like, you know what? I should just go back to violence, because when I'm just looking at this, I like your shot on the under 2.5. That's another thing that's right in my document as well. And I think that the unders, looking at an Andre Fili that takes the back of Bill Algeo. I mean, let's be frank, Bill Algeo is very difficult to submit, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And I think that Andre Fili in that spot, is kind of content to just grind it out, get a win. He's kind of at that point in his career where sometimes that's what matters. But last time out, he kind of saw a blueprint laid out. Like, if you put this guy on the ground, you put him in some uncomfortable spots, you beat him up a little bit, maybe he'll give it to you, maybe he'll give up a bad spot. And I think that for Andre Fili, at this point in his career, you can't be exchanging with these guys and just going out there shot for shot. And to your point, Nathaniel Wood's not a big guy, right? He's a former bantamweight. Might go back down at some point based on how that Naimov fight played out as well, right? Just a guy who's, a mid-level 145er, but hits pretty hard and was just too physical in some of the clinch positions where Nathaniel Wood normally has a lot of success. He also cheated his ass off, but you get my point. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, this is a guy in Lucas Almeida who, struggled really bad with Pat Sabatini. And then we saw Diego Lopes, who's obviously, a more proven fighter at this point, but a guy that still has some of the same problems. Look at how Joe Anderson Brito treated him, picked him up, turned him sideways, slammed him all over the place, right? And you look at that and then compare it, and it's like, holy smokes, Pat Sabatini just ran right through him like butter. So I do kind of question where his grappling is at for the UFC level. Daniel Zellhuber, I think, got some takedowns as well. Not really sure where his grappling's at the UFC level. He kind of beat up on Yagos before he got that sub, for example. So I do think to myself, Andre Fili by sub is how I envision it, but I would almost rather have violence props in the ends by sub, because here's the other thing about Andre. I don't expect him to get submitted by Almeida here if they're both, clear-eyed and thinking clearly at all. But I do think that he could get clubbed here. And we've seen Almeida in the past club people and grab the submission if it's there. And nobody will expect it, right? So if you can get a very similar price to the favorite to win by sub for the ends by sub, which I believe you can in the market, that is probably something I will look to do. Just to play into that extra variance and give myself an additional out. I'd rather sacrifice 20 cents, 40 cents, and have more outs than, pigeonhole myself into somebody, then they get clubbed and you're, just embarrassed. So that's what I'm looking into here, my man. And I like your shot on violence. So a couple different ways to target that fight. But with that being said, let's move to the next one, my man, where we got flyweight action. Tagir Ulanbekov taking on Cody Durden. One thing that stood out to me here, Cody Durden's on Twitter talking about this guy's got a staph infection on his back. Then he shows up to the face-off. He's wearing a T-shirt. I was thinking to myself, oh, he probably has an infection on his back, which is gross if that's true. Like, I don't know how they're going to let this fight go forward if that's the case, because that's just unhygienic and pretty disgusting. But in any case, like, it would make me a little bit less anxious to go out there and wrestle somebody for 15 minutes. I'll tell you that. But in any case, Cody Durden's probably knowing what he's signing up for. I think he's still going to go out there and try and get his takedowns, get on top in this fight if he can. And I do think we've seen Tagir struggle with the takedowns at times in the past. And we've seen, his takedown game translate up a weight class at 135 pounds. He went out there 10-8'd, Chris Gutierrez, who was just in the UFC main event on short notice. So I think we've seen examples of Cody Durden's wrestling, his strength translating. I think the problems for him in the past have mostly been getting clipped and getting submitted, or putting himself in a boneheaded position and getting submitted. So I think that's a live possibility in this spot, right? Tagir Ulanbekov has some submission prowess. I bet him inside the distance and by KO last time out. We got one of the two, right? But instead, right, he ended up getting that high elbow guillotine. Now, I've talked about this before on the show, the adaptation to the meta, where people are looking for high elbow guillotines. They're looking for the ninja choke because it's just easy money. I get the choke, it's over, right? It's a very difficult choke to escape from, especially if you can pin somebody against the fence. It's like impossible to escape from, right? It's like the fence gives you this leverage that you don't normally have in grappling, where I could go hip in, then put you to the cage. There is no more space. There's no more rolling. There's no more nothing. So I think that this is a spot where Tagir could potentially get the sub. But here's the other thing. I think Cody Durden is making huge improvements, right? We used to see him compete out of American Top Team Atlanta with the Lima brothers and whatever. But I think since he's transitioned to the American Top Team in Florida, where he's been working with, Pantojas and these other guys that are like prolific grapplers, I think he's gotten a lot better with the submission defense. I think he's gotten a little bit grittier in those positions. And I also think his cardio has improved. I think that he's getting better rounds with better fighters, and we're seeing that over time. One other thing that stood out to me in this matchup, Cody Durden has been way outperforming the market as an underdog, just like waxing the market as a dog. And honestly, I've lost a lot of money fading him in the past. So I don't think I'm being super biased when I say I thought he was a live underdog from when I looked at this matchup. I do think that Tagir can get the win, but if you're coming in with a staph infection, you have negative cardio from what I've seen in the past. I've seen you in very competitive wrestling and grappling situations where some guys were willing to put themselves on their back. That's the opposite of Cody Durden, right? If you say one bad thing about it, it's not that he goes out there to put himself on his back. So I think that he's going to go out there to try and get top position as frequently as possible in this fight. And I don't know that that's a great matchup for Tagir. I kind of thought of all the people he's fought, who's the closest archetype? Tim Elliott. He'll go out there and cheat his ass off, wrestle, and try and punch you in the face. I think Cody Durden will check every box, so in that regard. So for me, I think that Cody Durden is probably the money line side in this one, but close fight. And I'm interested to see what your thoughts are, brother.
I'm on the other side, Liam, on this one. I bet Tagir, and I also bet his sub prop. You're kind of spot on Durden making improvements. You can clearly see it, especially his cardio. But you talk about his wrestling, but I don't think his top control is that good, to be honest. And one thing that stuck out to me on tape is two things. First of all, I think that Tagir is going to have a big speed advantage on the feet. I was kind of surprised with his speed, with his striking. Like he's a Russian, but his striking is not that bad, and he has some speed, but also he can get taken down. But I think that his get up game is very, very good. Like he doesn't accept bottom position like a guy like Jake Ali. Jake Ali was content. I play Ali by sub also, and he was content to play on it off his back, but Tagir doesn't do that. And Cody Durden has kind of a way to put his head in bad position. And when he gets tired in fight, he's going to shoot takedowns still, right? And he's going to put himself again in bad position. But if he does that here against Tagir, like you said, his ninja choke, his guillotine, very good chokes from Ulanbekov in this one. I think that the Tim Elliott fight could have gone either way, to be honest. And also, we have to consider that Tim cheat a lot in this fight. That's also true. But yeah, I mean, Tagir fought some killers. I think Durden has some leg kicks upside. We are seeing Tagir struggle with this against Bruno Silva. It was. And but yeah, I love his submission defense. I also love his wrestling. I think they can both land takedown, but the difference is I don't think Ulanbekov is gonna accept bottom position. And I think on the feet he's the cleaner striker. I also think that he's faster and he has better cardio. So I expect him to win the third round at a pretty high clip, to be honest. And the first two rounds can be close, but I think he has almost all the finishing upside in this fight. So I bet him at minus 160. Also bet the sub prop at plus 350. I think someone mentioned the fight end by sub at plus 250. If that's true, that's kind of crazy because I've seen Tagir sub lines kind of around plus 300 now. So if that's really a line, I mean, that has to be the bet. Not to say I think Durden's going to submit him, but Liam talked about this strategy about taking the both side of the sub prop, which is very smart in my opinion. So at these odds, it's definitely the bet. But plus 350, I was liking Ulanbekov sub. It's still there, by the way, like plus 350 on FanDuel, plus 360 on BetRiver, on Unibet. So yeah, I think he's going to submit him early. If he doesn't, I think it's going to be a 29-28 decision either way.
There you go, my man. And, that's kind of the way that I feel about this fight as well. When I was mapping out the paths for Durden, I did check all of the methods in my document. But the thing that stood out to me the most, was him by decision, him by split decision. They're both pretty low numbers. Like I do think that they kind of recognize from a bookmaking standpoint, if he wins this fight, it's probably going to be on the strength of takedowns, gritting some bad positions out, and potentially outlasting him. The one thing that I would note is like if he has a staph infection, he's got to be on antibiotics, right? And if you look at a guy like Kevin Lee, he came out there barnstorming Tony Ferguson when they fought, but then by the 6-minute mark, he was completely exhausted. And I could tell you from being on antibiotics in the past myself, when I came back to training too quick, I was like, oh, it'll be fine. What's it? I'm like puking 15 minutes into a session because I'm like, oh, that's it. I can't do this right now, and I think that when I look at that as a potential narrative, that's the only thing that concerns me. But again, you're getting the number at the best of it. I've been watching that number all week. Tagir by sub is in my document. It's not really gotten much above that plus 350 number. I think you mentioned a plus 360. That would have been like as good as you've seen all week. So I think that there's if you like that and you have access to that ends by sub, you could always split them as well. That's something I do pretty frequently if I'm on somebody to win by sub, but I think it's going to be a ton of grappling. That's normally the predicate for a fight ends by sub or for either person to win by sub, right? Is either I think there's a good club and sub opportunity, or I think there's a good chance there's a lot of grappling minutes. And so I think that's a great way to get maximal value. It's like a stackable hedge. And almost always the fight ends by sub is plus money. It depends on the matchup, but just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, not to cut you off, but
please go ahead, my man.
Plus 250 fight end by sub drafting in FanDuel right now.
There you go.
So yeah, that's definitely a good spot.
Awesome. So he's seeing value on it. I think there could be some value as well. With that being said, another fight between. I thought this was ironic, right? The UFC is notorious for these ironic matchups. They've got King Casey O'Neill taking on the Queen of Violence, Ariane Lipski. So a matchup of women's royalty, if you will. And King Casey O'Neill, I think, let a lot of people down last time out. A lot of people pretty confident in her rise, in what she had been working on and what she'd been doing. And she took on the very tough, the very seasoned Jennifer Maia, who's no longer with the company. I think that comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but she was quietly let go just for kind of being boring, right? It's not like she wasn't pretty good at fighting. It was just that she didn't ever have a style that was really inviting. And if you're not going out there to finish fights and you're not going out there to market fights, the UFC is like PFL or something would be better for you. God bless. Like that's just not the business we're in. So Drahvy, I'm curious what your thoughts are. We'll have you kick off this matchup, but I think it's a fascinating one, man, with a lot of question marks on both sides.
Yeah, I love Lipski a lot in this spot, Liam. Especially because I think I have a better read than the market on Lipski. I bet on it in her last fight against Gato, and O'Neal is still under like overvalue over the market, and the difference is for Lipski, so she's undervalued by the market. So I think there's some spot like that where I feel I have a big hedge on it, just because of the the bookies watching, or just the people in general. The Montana de la Rosa fight, for example, for Lipski, the Zombie Girl fight, and the fights before that, like against the Antonia Shevchenko, when she got finished, when she got exposed on the ground. But she's not the
I
same
bet on
fighter.
her that fight. That's the only time I ever bet on her.
Oh, really? Oh, it's annoying.
Against Shevchenko, I got showered too early, bro. I missed the boat because of my bad experience.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. But I mean, people are still taping this fight and considering that's the same fighter. And I remember Clint talk about what was the girl that fought recently. She's married with Artie, Veronica Artie, right? It was like she's a girl again that is not the same fighter that she was before on tapes. And again, she was the underdog and she still performed better than what people expected. I was on the other side for this matchup, so I know what I'm talking about. But I think Lipski is the same thing. She's way better on the ground now. I mean, her takedown defense and her balance is very improved. She moves to Amanda Nunes camp. She took her training more seriously. She talked about it. The fight that she got KO against Zombie Girl, she tried to swing and bang with her in the pocket. Bad idea. But she had back-to-back tough weight cut for this fight. She talked about it also that she's not gonna take these type of fights anymore. She's taking everything more serious, and she used to kind of put herself in bad position on the feet, but now she's like more composed. She's really out there to win, and she doesn't want to go on the ground. The floor is lava now. So yeah, the balance, the takedown defense, you can see the improvements. Very impressive in her last two fights. But again, people are still gonna go out there and think that Casey just gonna out wrestle her. First of all, she's not. She's a striker, Casey O'Neill. She's well rounded, but she's a striker. She shoot takedowns, but she didn't really shoot takedown in the last two fights. Maybe it was because she was fighting good grapplers, right? But her weapon or her cardio and the volume that she put, the pace. So she's gonna do that probably in this spot. But I don't think she's gonna be successful with the wrestling. I don't think she's that good of a wrestler. If she gets on top, she got good ground and pound, and it can be the fight, right? But myself, I don't see O'Neal getting takedowns in this spot. So with that being said, I favor Lipski on the feet. I think she hit harder. I think she's cleaner. And O'Neal, when she rushed in, she put a good pace, but she's very hittable. And Lipski's good on the back foot and she's good on the front foot, right? So I love that. And I love the fact that she's going to punch harder, do more damage. And I think she's live for knockout, Liam. I think she could get a KO in this spot, to be honest. I think the under is a good look. It's going to be a violent fight, the king versus the queen. But yeah, I bet Lipski plus 185. She's still around plus 170, plus 175. I think that's a good spot. Probably one of my favorite on the card. I have 2 units on her, and I'm like, if the line go back up, I might consider adding a unit. I think people are just putting too much stock into O'Neal wrestling and Lipski bad takedown defense that she used to have. But I see this fight being on the feet for the most part, where I favor Lipski. I think she's going to land the cleaner shot, the harder shot, and they're both live for a finish, though. If O'Neal gets on top, I think she's very live for a finish, good ground and pound. And if Lipski stay on the feet, I think she has the power to knock her out. So that's going to be a good fight, man. I'm excited for this one.
I love when we see these fights the same way, my man. And I'll tell you, I'll read out the list that's in my document for this fight because I think it connects a lot to what you've said so far.
Let's
O'Neal
go.
KO, O'Neal sub, O'Neal ITD, Lipski KO, Lipski sub, Ends KO, End sub, and the fight not to go the distance. I just see this as a violent fight between these two women, right? Casey O'Neal, you look at the record, looks a little bit better on paper, I think, than it really is. She did do a good job of going out there and beating the people they put in front of her. But you look at that roster of women, and most of them are not employed by the UFC anymore, right? And they're not at a very high level. So she went out there, she did the job, she got the takedown, she got the finish. But last time, I think of Jennifer Maia as a pretty overrated fighter by UFC standards, right? I think when she was around, people really thought highly of her. I thought she clearly got outboxed by Jessica Ai but Jessica I had a big gash on her face from a clash of heads. So she just looked like she was getting beat up the whole fight. She was bleeding everywhere, but like I thought she was winning the exchanges. Like I just felt like she kept getting these lucky bounces, even against Shevchenko. I thought Shevchenko was overrated in the wrestling and grappling. That got vindicated over and over again in subsequent bouts. So you just see like some of that was fool's gold. And she went out there and won a competitive striking fight with Casey last time. And Casey will admit in the interviews that she joined, she basically got in a little too early, right? She said like, I was, feeling the effects of my knee surgery. I shouldn't have been in there, that quickly, but I'm feeling a lot better now. And I've been trying to book fights and get back in there. So this was another super intense face-off, right? Both women, really trying to get after it. Love that for a violence bet. Love that, especially at plus money. And she has the 2 losses as an amateur via KO, TKO, right? So it's not like she can't be hurt. It's not like she can't be knocked out. And she's been bloodied up by Roxanne Modafferi, like somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier. But she also got, I think, bloodied up, if my memory serves, against Jennifer Maia. I know she got hit cleanly many times in that fight as well. So I don't think her defense on the feet is something to write home about. But I do think that she has an ability to win this fight by finish, like you mentioned. We've seen it. She's just relentless with the ground and pound. And in women's MMA, you don't need to necessarily put somebody out with the ground and pound. You just need to start yelling a little bit. You need to go off. You need to just be relentless. And a lot of times the referee will intervene, a little bit more proactively than they would in a men's MMA scenario. So shout out to Londo. He says he played O'Neal by KO here. I could see it. I do think that there's some value in the market to be had. If you compare sharp markets to where you can get some of these outlier prices over 5-1. And I think that the ITDs are just an interesting way to play this when you've got 2 women that have defensive liabilities, but they both have very potent offense as well. I think that this is a great point for Mel in the chat. It says, Liam, Casey just got nose surgery because she broke it in the Maia fight. Point in case right there. So I think that both these women, violent chance to finish this fight by knockout via strikes. But I also think that in these contentious exchanges on the mat, you don't want to get burnt if, somebody snatches up a sub. We have seen Lipski go for opportunistic subs in the past. I believe it was Luana Carolina. She hit one of the craziest knee bars you'll ever see, like basically turned her knee halfway inside out, which was pretty gross. But admittedly, we also have seen, Casey O'Neal work on her ground game, go for a lot of ground and pound strikes. And if somebody gives the back, gives up a bad situation, I wouldn't be surprised if she was to grab that. So I think fight not to go, unders, violence props on either side. I love it all. I love it all. So I'll probably get involved with that fight. It's one I've been looking at all week, and hearing you feel a lot of the same way, it just gives me a lot more confidence. I do think this is a tricky fight card, right? Like, especially one thing that always throws me off, man, I like to look at these cards holistically. I like to try and get a feel for how the whole thing's going to play out. And then fights start falling off, and I'm just like, all right, my whole plan is in sunders now. So I'm going to do even more digging, but I feel like I'd be surprised if I don't have some kind of violence play on that fight before all is said and done. Potentially on the side as well, but definitely some generic violence there. Next up, my man, we've got a fight that looks like it might have some generic violence in store as well. We've got Cody Garbrandt taking on Brian Boom Kelleher, and it could be Brian Boom or bust Kelleher, based on his recent performances, right? Hasn't been going his way. New York guy. We're always rooting for Boom on this show. But he is a guy that's been struggling. He got a neck surgery that was pretty serious. Not something that necessarily screams confidence going into a cage fight, right? Coming off of a major neck surgery. And he's also coming off of 2 losses prior to that. So it's not like he was doing super good and then, he got the neck surgery. And so now it's like, oh, can he replicate those great results he was having? It's like, no, he's on a little bit of a rough run, trying to find his way, and he's got to come back. So I do think the confidence could be a problem here for Boom. But if there's anything that'll give you confidence, it's knowing that Cody Garbrandt is a little bit chinny, right? He's been cracked a number of times. He's been hurt in his career, but more recently, Cody seems like he understands the assignment, right? Like he gets that he's getting hurt too much in these fights. So we've been seeing, I think it shows in his Instagram, right? You go to his Instagram, who's he working with? Lance Palmer, Ohio State wrestling legend, Chase Palmy. He's working with a lot of guys that coach wrestling, right? And he's working, I believe, at least most of the time in Ohio, right? So instead of, going out to California where they're all hanging out and doing some striking, some cardio kickboxing, maybe a guillotine or two, he's getting back in the gritty roots of Ohio, getting down to wrestle. And I'll tell you, I'm from New York, right? I'll rep New York. The New York boys will teach you how to wrestle once again. You've heard it how many times on the show? I went to Ohio and got my ass humbled, bro. There's one state in this union that knows how to wrestle. Pennsylvania, Ohio. Them boys know how to get down. So I think that I look at this fight and I say to myself, Cody Garbrandt should have a path to takedowns here. He should have a path to landing big shots on the feet with his speed if he's able to get in and out on Brian. And Brian doesn't have the longest reach. When you look at the social medias on this card, I don't talk about this for every matchup. I don't, stick on this for everything. But you look at the social medias for this matchup. One of the biggest stars on the card by the numbers is Cody Garbrandt, right? He's been around a long time. He's a former champion. And one thing that I feel is like the UFC probably doesn't want this guy to just go out there and keep getting flatlined and embarrassed like every time out, right? He's a former champ, kind of bad for the brand, right? So I think that they want to pick some fights for him that he can win, that he could go out there and get right. And I think that this is a potential spot to do that. Do I think Brian has a path to finishing? Absolutely. He goes out there, he fights blood and guts. His career's on the line in all likelihood. So I think he's going to go out there and swing for the fences. I think he's going to try and clip Cody. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a war of sorts, but my concerns here are, number one, if you just got neck surgery and somebody wraps any kind of hands around your neck, are you going to tap? I think you would. We've seen before, Jan Blachowicz gets can openered by Glover Teixeira in the opening minute and then taps to nothing because his neck was already completely jacked. And he said as much after. He's like, yeah, I had a pre-existing neck injury. He pulled on my neck really hard and I couldn't do anything about it. I was like, ow, I'm now messed up. And then as soon as Glover gets his back, it's quick tap Magoo. You see the same thing with Amanda Nunes. So Cody's never attempted a sub in the UFC, but I do think if there was ever a time, it's like this guy just got submitted in the first round twice in a row. I do think Mario Bautista, better grappler than Cody Garbrandt. Umar Nurmagomedov, league's better grappler than Cody Garbrandt. That would not be, they should not put that on the next Fight Pass Invitational. But
are you sure?
I mean, if they have betting odds and people aren't paying attention, then I think that'd be great. But I think that Cody should have an opportunity to go out there and just ground boom, pretty early and often. So then it's just a question of, is his jiu-jitsu so bad that he's going to get submitted by a guy fresh off a neck surgery, or should he be able to pass positions, hold on to him, and land some ground and pound, potentially just grab any kind of submission here and get the win in the finish, get back into the win column, get the celebration of the crowd, and then probably get fed to a prospect in his next fight and get finished brutally in the first round. Drahvy, how do you feel about this one, my man? I do think there's some real, intrigue to this matchup because seems like people are betting on it one way and the other. It seems like, Cody by decision and these kind of things are attracting attention. But for me, I don't feel extremely bullish one way or the other. I just think that based on the skill, based on the youth, based on the pedigree, got to lean with Garbrandt here.
Yeah. I've just talked about some fights that I had a good read on, so I talk about them for longer. It's not a fight I have a good read on. I think there's a lot of volatility in this one. You mentioned Kelleher's surgery. That's a good point. I mean, the injury that he had, he's also on the older side. You mentioned Garbrandt chin, like, is not good anymore. But you also mentioned in his last fight, he switched his style. Like, he wrestled, he was fighting safe. That's good to see. But to me, that's a little bit tricky because I wanted to bet the under for this fight at first. But Kelleher is durable. He tends to get sub when he loses. Garbrandt's not a guy that's going for submission. And then he's chinny, but he's fighting safer. So is this fight really going under? Like, people betting the under, loving Kelleher finish props, but the line is not moving that much, People are betting Garbrandt by decision. It's around plus 200 right now. But Liam, in his last fight, it was like plus 500 or something. So now it's plus 200 for the decision prop. I don't like this at all. I understand that he could win a decision, but yeah, I can't trust his durability at chalk like that. Kelleher does it hard. He's not like a very good finisher, but he does it hard. He has good guillotine. But yeah, I think violence is probably the bet, if any. I think Cody probably win and get a finish. He's faster on the feet, cleaner boxer. But yeah, I just don't trust him. And if you just go out there and wrestle for a decision, then I bet the under, I'm gonna be mad. And if I bet him at chalk and he get chin, I'll be mad. So I think it's as far as the money line goes, I think it's dog or pass. But yeah, I think maybe the under is a good look, but I don't have a good read on it, so I'm just gonna pass. I'm gonna pick Cody to win, but yeah, as far as the bet goes, I think it's dog or pass.
You know, I've done this before, and I feel like I might have to do it once again here. Which I've called a bunch of people's first career submission. I have a gut feeling that Cody Garbrandt gets his first career submission this weekend. I might be wrong, man, but I don't like the idea of somebody who could get out wrestled and just imagine this scenario. Imagine Cody picks him up. If you know Cody's wrestling style, right? A lot of times double leg, and he cuts it hard, bro. He cuts an angle. He's strong, so he goes up, sideways, and like rips the legs out from under you. Imagine you just have a surgically repaired neck and you get slammed in a double leg onto your back. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to get TKO'd, but like imagine he just like feels a problem in his neck and taps him twice and the fight's over. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like maybe they ruled out a TKO. I'm actually not sure. But that's the one thing that makes me lean towards violence being the answer here is I do worry with people that are fragile. And I worry that Boom could be fragile off of surgery. I know that Garbrandt can be fragile. I bet into that, schematic in the past. But ironically, one bet that I lost on a Garbrandt fight was the fight not to start round 4 with Rob Font. And he got battered and just took all the shots that night. So that's why betting on chins and against chins in MMA is not easy. But I just think, you got to look at long-term patterns. So I do think there's a long-term pattern suggests there's inherent volatility to the matchup, but I think Garbrandt is just a better fighter skill for skill. And based on what we know about the intangibles, I do prefer his side in this matchup. Next up, we've got a 135-pound matchup between Irene Aldana and Carol Rosa. Back to the women's side of things here. And Irene Aldana, struggled a little bit on the scales today. Comes out with that black hair, kind of switches between looks a little bit, fight over fight. And Carol Rosa looked a little bit more focused, a little bit more prepared, I thought, in terms of the physicality, potentially at this face-off. And she looked very intense as well, but then respectful at the end, shake hands. So I'm expecting both these ladies to come out here to compete. But I got to tell you, man, Irene Aldana, until I go see a good performance from her, she is dead to me, brother, because I thought that against Amanda Nunes, you've got a woman that, granted, way better, more physical, more skills, right? But you should think of it as like a ultimate opportunity, right? She's preparing to retire. She said as much beforehand. So I'm just thinking to myself, I was certain that Nunes was going to retire after that fight. And so she goes out there and just lays the egg of all time. Doesn't really fight, doesn't attempt strikes. Her corner is like, please attempt to strike her. Please go out there and attack. Please do something. Like they're begging and pleading between rounds as she's just letting the opportunity slip through her fingers. When you're 25, when you're 28, 31, you go out there, you blow it. All right, we'll get them next time. You can't really afford to make that mistake when you get the title shot when you're already in your mid to late 30s. They're never giving her a title shot again, in my opinion, unless she gets a spectacular knockout here, right? So maybe that's her incentive. Maybe she's going to be fired up and motivated to go back, prove I'm still here. I still deserve big opportunities, but you'd think the preparation would have been a little better if that's the case, right? You'd think the weight cut would have been a little smoother, maybe, if that's the case. But what do we know? It's harder to cut weight as you get older, right? And for Carol Rosa, she's kind of managed that by moving back and forth between 35 and 45, staying active, getting more opportunities. I feel like she's probably put herself in a better position to win this fight coming in. And I do think that Irene Aldana, for me, just until I see a great performance from her where she goes out there and wins and it's running away and it's clear, I can't get behind her because I thought Macy Chiasson was going to beat her. And then I was like, okay, maybe she's just the more violent, intense woman. She could stay focused for the whole 25 and keep dangerous. No, wrong, completely wrong. She was the least dangerous fighter I've ever seen in a title fight. So, I'm out on Irene Aldana for the time being, unless you can convince me otherwise, brother. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I think Rosa is the money line side. It's kind of funny because the market doesn't give her any finishing upside. I think it's true, don't get me wrong, but her money line's around plus 150 to plus 160, and the decision is around plus 180. So
I've lost money betting Hosa ITD at way worse prices. I'll tell you that, my brother.
oh yeah. The problem I have with Rosa Liam is she starts slow in her fight. Like sometimes just too late. She always have a good third round, but sometimes the fight's over and she loses the 29-28 decision against Sarah McMahon, for example, and things like that. So I didn't like her performance against Yana Santos. I'll tell you that. I think that she didn't fight to her best ability, and this fight should not be that close. But again, she did start too slow, and that's a problem with her. She's younger. Maybe she's gonna fix that. Um, but I think that Aldana is live for a finish in this spot. I played the early props on her. I didn't think it was making sense because the ITD was around plus 350 ish when it opened. So I just put a unit on the KO at plus 550 and the sub at plus 1200 instead of just playing the ITD. It was better return in this case. I don't want to go too big. I don't think she's like, if you go the distance, I'm confident that it's going to be close. That's why I'm saying that Rosa is the money line side, you know. But if there's a finish, I'm very confident that Aldana has way more finishing upside, and I think that her boxing is crisp. I just think that sometimes she go out there and she get a big left hook in the pocket and she looks very good, but sometimes she's low volume, she doesn't do much, so she's kind of hard to trust, especially at chalk like that. So I don't want to get too invested into this fight, but I like her finish prop. I think she has some finishing upside. We have also seen Rosa making mistakes on the ground, and I think Aldana has some sneaky jiu-jitsu. I'll say that she play off her back a little bit too much at time, but I can see her getting a submission. I think it's live, but also on the feet. Rosa has good clinch game, good knees, things like that, but she's hoping for counter for counter shots. And we have seen Aldana put out some girls like the Kathleen Vieira knockout was brutal, and like we have also seen her getting a finish out of her ass when she was down against Missy Shields, right? That was a crazy finish, but these type of things tell me that she's the type of girl that can expect against not Amanda Nunes, right? Because that's not the same type of matchup. But against her lower level competition, she has shown me the ability to finish fight by sub, by knockout, and to get a finish when she's down many rounds and she needs a finish. So I love that about her. So I love the finish prop that I play on this one. I think she's gonna get a finish, but if somehow they go the distance, I don't want to pay the chalk. So I think Rosa's live if the fight goes over.
Fair play, my man. I don't hate it. When I did my document for this fight, this is the most I had, I think, for any fight on the prelims. Like, I wanted to investigate every price here because I do think that there's a few different ways that this fight could play out, right? Like, I have everything from, Carol Hosa by split decision to, the finish props, like you mentioned, on the Aldana side, because when you look at Aldana historically, she's not that great of a round winner. So I do think like most of her winning equity against somebody like Carol Hosa, who's like mostly focused on trying to win rounds, would come from her finishing equity, right? And something else that I looked at is, Carol Hosa has had a few fights where she's been the smaller girl, and she's done okay in those fights, but this is a girl that does swing with a lot of power, right? I thought that Ketlen Vieira was a really serious fighter. She's kind of regressed a little bit, I feel. But when she was out there in that fight, I thought that she was one of the top girls in the division, pretty confident at that time as well, and aggressive. And I think the reason we've seen a lot more tentative performances from her ever since is because he got flattened by Irene Aldana. So Irene Aldana has rare power for women's MMA, right? A lot of women just can't produce that kind of knockout. They could get an attritional TKO, something like that, but they can't just line up a left hook and floor somebody. So I do think that Irene Aldana does pack a real punch. Carol Hosa presents a lot of opportunities to counter because of her high volume style. But I think that could end up either way, right? She is getting a little bit older. She's relying on the counter. That could lead to taking a bunch of shots at a time as well. So I think that there's some finishing equity on the Hosa side. I think that she's always blown it, like you said, by not starting early enough, by typically turning it on in round 3 when it's already too late. And then like her best moments are as the fight expires and you're like, Carol, did you know that it was 15 minutes? But I do think, she's let me down enough to not invest. But another fight where it's going to be women's MMA. I think people are going to lean towards the fight goes over the distance, all those things pretty heavily, just because that's how women's fights tend to go. But for me, that would be correlated with a Carol Hosa win. So I think that if, you're leaning towards violence, you're leaning towards a Reina Aldana because she's a much more proven finisher at this level. So I'm interested to see how this fight shakes out. I want to like a Reina Aldana, but bro, she let me down so hard last time. I talked her up and then she made a fool of me. So I think that this should be a great fight, man. Next up, we've got a light heavyweight bout that will be closing out the prelims. The prelim headliner. We'll send this over to you first, Drahvy. We've got Alonzo Atomic Menifield taking on the Hanyak, Justin Jacoby. Fascinating matchup in the light heavyweight division. I thought Alonzo Menifield had the best hair of the day. I don't know what you thought, but what do you think about this matchup, my man?
Yeah, I think Jacoby's going to win, but I think the price tag is a little bit wide just because Menifield has power and he's going to go for it early. I feel like he maybe has some wrestling upside. I don't trust him to use it, though. And the over-under is a little bit tricky because I can see Jacoby just winning based on volume, leg kicks, and outpointing him to a decision. But to me, it really depends on how Menifield fight. Because if he go out there early, he try to get a finish, he's going to be live to get a finish in the first round. But if he doesn't get a finish, I think he's going to slow down depending on the pace that he put. And if he slow down, Jacoby's going to finish him late in the fight. That's how I kind of see it. And if he doesn't do that and they both fight kind of slow and low pace, I think it's going to go the distance and Jacoby's going to win a decision. So I was hoping that money came enough on Menifield to bet Jacoby around minus 175 or something, but it's clearly not the case. Menifield at like plus 240 is a good bet in my opinion, just because of his power. Jacoby durability is a little bit on the downside, if I can say. He's a guy that used to be very durable. He's still very durable, but he's getting cracked more often now. He's getting dropped. He's getting wobbled a little bit more. So with a guy like that, when he's minus 300, that's when I kind of want to be on the other side against a power puncher like Menifield. But I think that skills for skill, Jacoby's has better techniques, better cardio. And yeah, I think he should win the fight. But again, I don't want to pay this price. I think the Menifield's clearly decide at these odds, but I'm not confident enough on my read on the fight to make a bet. The under looks solid, but again, maybe the fight doesn't go because of the style of matchup. But I can really see Jacoby winning a decision. So do I really want to get invested in this one? I think there's better spot on the card. So like you said, last card of the year, I want to end I want to end the year with a bang. And I don't want to risk on some fight that I don't have a strong read on because I don't need to. Like I can pick my spots, and if I don't feel strongly about this fight, and I see many different way of the fight going down, and I don't see much value on the line, why bet it? I like Menifield money line. I think that's a good bet. That's the way I would bet the fight if I do, but I'm not going to, so I'm passing. Maybe you have a stronger read than me on this one, Liam.
I wouldn't say I have a stronger read, but I do think that the money line pricing is just off. So am I going to play it? I haven't decided yet, but it would always be a dog or pass situation for me. And let me just talk about, why I feel that way, right? Number one, let's just talk about who Justin Jacoby is. Good fighter, right? Whenever I talk about these prices, I think sometimes people think is he saying these guys are the same skill? No, of course not, but it's a fight. Skills are part of fights. They're an important piece, but they're not everything. And here's the other important dynamic is, what's your backup plan? What happens if your first skill is not working right now, or you get hurt, or you're busted in your eye? Do you have a plan B? Is there another route you could take to victory? That's an important question I always have, right? So sometimes I like to think, who's the more dangerous guy? Is Justin Jacoby that much more dangerous than Alonzo Menifield? I mean, I'm not sold on that idea, which I'd want to be if he's a big favorite, right? We've got a guy in Alonzo Menifield who's got big knockout power. Who's going to be more likely to win this fight by submission? I don't think that that's a question, right? I think Alonzo Menifield is more likely to attempt a submission, more likely to attempt a takedown, more likely to, be in those grappling advantageous situations. So I think for all those reasons, you're like, okay, so Alonzo Menifield, big, strong. All right, he's got to be 10 years older than? No, they're the same age. All right, so Dustin Jacoby has spent, more time in MMA or kickboxing. He's gone back and forth, right? And when he's been in MMA, he was submitted back in the day. So then he spent some time working on his ground game, working on his kickboxing. He got absolutely flatlined in the most brutal fashion you can ever imagine by Alex Pereira. Guys, go back and watch that if you've never seen it. It's like ping ponged all over like Johnny Walker, right? And not to say that this is the same kind of power in Alonzo Menifield, but this is years and years later. This is fights and fights later. And he's been in a bunch of these fights where it's contentious, where it's back and forth, to your point, getting hurt more, getting dropped more, getting wobbled, having these fights. I think Maxime Grishin had him wobbled, if my memory serves. I know that Iwan Kutalaba had, him all over the place, right? 10-8 first round. And you see the resolve of Jacoby. You see his willingness to suffer, take damage, and keep coming forward. Like, the guy wants to be here. The guy works really hard. I think there's a lot of admirable qualities. But this is a light heavyweight division, right? It's like the margin for error here is like, I get hit on the chin one time, I could be asleep. This isn't like the other divisions where there might be like, I can start to read his patterns. I can start to see where he's hitting me from. It's like, he hits me one time on the side of the chin and I didn't see it coming. We might just not be having this conversation anymore, right? And I think that for me, you don't have the grappling upside. You don't have the wrestling upside. You're not going to take him down. So best case scenario, you're going to be exchanging strikes with a guy who's a big, powerful striker at minus 300. Like, no, not for me, dude. Never. That's just not the way that I roll. So can he win? Yes. Should he be favored? Yes. Should it be closer to minus 150, minus 185? That is my honest opinion. It's just because of the inherent volatility of the weight class, because he does not have that plan B with the takedowns and the wrestling and the grappling upside. So I think that Jacoby, good fighter, good skills, should win. If should was the only thing we had to worry about, we'd all make a lot more money, right? But I do think that Alonzo represents a live dog. Here's the other thing I wanted to point out. He has never been a dog, right? When he's been a dog, he was a dog one time, he won. Cashed a nice ticket for everybody that bet him that time. So this is a guy that's been favored in basically every UFC fight, including his steps up in competition, including the ones he lost. You look at the fight he lost against William Knight, it's comical that he lost that fight because nothing took place in the third round. Like, they just did not have anything to score. He pins him against the fence for 4.5 minutes, which I think should have won him the round because it's the only thing that actually happened, right? Control. But then William Knight attempted offense. He came for he swung punches. Nothing landed. Nothing connected. They gave him the decision because he attempted strikes. Hats off to him, right? I think that working with Pat Barry, taking it a little less seriously, getting out of his own head has actually been good for him. I thought he showed a much better product against Jim Crute in the draw. And then I thought in that subsequent fight, he looked way better. And I thought that he kind of broke Jim in the first fight. And so when he was like, oh yeah, rebook that one, let's do it again. He was the guy who was the much more willing party, I felt there. And that showed in the aftermath as well. He's a guy that does damage. And I think that this is a guy, it's either put up or shut up time, right? He's 36 years of age. But in this division, you can hang on a little bit longer. Dustin Jacoby, 35, no spring chicken, spent his whole life getting in fisticuffs. His chin could give out in this spot. And at minus 300, I think the bookmakers will be like, yes, if they can get this one across the finish line, because I don't think a lot of people are running to the well to bet Alonzo in this spot personally. So something to think about. But great fight on paper, and we'll see how it plays out at 205. That is the prelim headliner, which means we've got 5 main card fights to talk about, and they're good ones, baby. So let's start with Josh Emmett taking on Thug Nasty, Bryce Mitchell. Would you like to start us off on this one, Drahvy?
Yeah, I think that's a good fight. I'm going to talk about the short notice aspect because I think that's important to mention. People are going to probably try to bet Emmett because of the odds, like he's a live dog, but the short notice here, I think, kind of favor Mitchell more than it favor Emmett. And I'm going to explain you why. Emmett was in a training camp, full training camp, to fight a very good kickboxer. So he was not training for takedown defense, for submission defense, and things like that. He was training to fight a good kickboxer. Mitchell, on the other hand, I've listened to some interviews, and he was ready to accept a short notice fight. He's in good shape. He was training, that he said, and he think that's a good matchup for him. that's a good matchup for him because Josh Emmett has a wrestling background, but his takedown defense is not very good, and he has not fought very good grappler. I mean, he's not fighting grapplers, he's not fighting good wrestler. But when people try to take him down, they're successful. But people not really trying to grapple him because most of the time he's fighting striker. Now he's getting older. He took a lot of damage in his last two fights, and he's fighting a good wrestler, a guy that's gonna push a pace, a guy that is not gonna stop to shoot the takedown if the first one doesn't work. I bet Bryce Mitchell in his last fight against Dan Ige. I was kind of worried because of the eyes, because of the damage and all that. But man, his grappling looks very good. Like this dude is when he gets on top, the body lock. I don't know if you remember Liam, but when he was kind of losing the body triangle, I think in the third round against Dan Ige. But Dan Ige was trying to get back up, and the body triangle was falling, and he completely reversed it and take the back. That was a crazy scramble from Bryce in this spot. And yeah, I think that he's very good on the ground, but I think his striking serviceable. We have seen him get drop guy like Edson Barboza. People that are worried because of the takedowns, sometimes the wrestler on the feet look better, right? Barboza versus Mitchell. Mitchell was winning the striking exchange against Edson Barboza. If I tell you that right now, you're gonna say, "Oh, you're crazy," but that's the fact. So in this case, I don't see Josh Emmett looking that good on the feet. First of all, he's older. He took a lot of damage, so that's a good point. But like I said, he's gonna be worried about Bryce shooting takedowns on him, so he's gonna be more low volume, right? So I think that Bryce gonna have an easy way to get this fight to the mat, and when he does, I think he's alive for a sub. They're both going to decision a lot in their career. I was liking the under at first because if the fight stays standing, Josh Emmett's always live for a knockout because the way he punch and he swing for hit. And Bryce is durable, but he can get cracked. His striking defense is not the best. And on the ground, I feel like it's one-way traffic. I think Bryce gonna get on top and he's gonna work. Is he gonna submit him? I don't know, but I think he's live to do so. I kind of favor a decision after tapes, but I think that Bryce is the clear side. And I'm kind of mad at myself, Liam, because I was watching the line moving. Bryce was minus 125, minus 150, and I didn't tape it yet. So after tapes, he was around minus 200, and I can't bet him in this spot at this number, unfortunately. I think he's winning this fight 7 out of 10 time, minus 225 maybe. It's the line now. I think it's a fair line, but am I getting any value on this line? No. So what's the point to bet in now? I think he's still a solid play. Maybe the sub prop for a sprinkle because we just don't know about Josh Emmett not takedown defense, but his submission defense, grappling in general. We don't really know. And yeah, I think Bryce gonna go for it. He's gonna work for it. So I like him to win in this spot. Decision, submission, I'm not sure, but I think he's the side.
I agree with you that he's the side. And I do think that the short notice is at least something to consider from a cardio perspective, right? Whenever you're going to try and push a wrestling, grappling heavy game plan, you want to be primed, ready to go do that. But when it's your bread and butter, when it's your game plan every time out, when it's what you're always working on in the training room, it's probably something that you're going to be able to produce for 15 minutes, right? If this is a 5-round main event, a title fight, something like that, maybe we're having a different conversation. But I think that Bryce being able to make the weight, saying yes to the opportunity, I think those are, big signs that he's ready to go here, right? It's one thing when you have a matchup booked with Ilia Topuria and you don't feel well, you're just expected to make the walk more often than not, right? Some guys pull out, but some guys just make that walk no matter what, or they try and hide it from the commission, whatever it is. And I think of a guy like Bryce Mitchell as a guy that probably went out there and made a really boneheaded decision, paid the price. But you look at the fight that he had with Ilia, and I think people would think it's less competitive because he gets finished. And I completely disagree. I thought he actually made it an honest fight. I thought he took him down. I thought he tested his grappling a little bit. I thought he tested his strength, right? Ilya is a big, strong guy. Bryce was able to go out there, put him to the ground, sit him to his butt. But I think Bryce spent a lot of energy doing that. And I think he took too much damage along the way. And I think eventually he just ran out of rope there because he was too tired, too sick, too damaged, and he was out of options, right? Ilya is also one of the best guys in the world, right? And he's the only guy that's ever got him in the UFC. I think that Ilya very live, to take a title next fight, right? So you're looking at a guy in Bryce Mitchell who lost to a world-class fighter, And he's since bounced back with a nice win over Dan Ige. You know, I had my skepticism there. Dan Ige, that's a great bet by you, right? He got the win. But I always just think of Dan Ige as a guy that's very tough to finish, right? Really difficult to get out of there. He's all grit, all toughness, all heart. You got to kill him. So I was like, I don't really see Bryce finishing him. I think he's going to have to grind this out for the full 15. I think that's going to be tough. So he was able to do it, but I did think that was a really tough stylistic matchup. Am I saying that Emmett's an easy style matchup? No, but what I look at on paper is a guy who got beat to a bloody pulp his last fight. He got beat to a bloody pulp his fight before that. The fight before that, he got his face rearranged at times, but also got the win by, close to say. It's like there's been a lot of signs of like, man, taking a lot of damage. He's willing to go out there and just put it all on the line, sacrifice his health. But like he's been doing that a lot. And he's getting to a point where he's very old for this division. And Bryce Mitchell, young, strong, big for the division. Think he's going to go out there and leverage that size. But you often watch Josh Emmett fighting with his hands a little bit lower, right? He's kind of keeping them cocked back, trying to throw these big bombs that are going to kill you. And I think that in part, is something he's going to try and use here, especially to defend takedowns, right? He's going to try and keep his hands really low. And we've seen one time, Bryce Mitchell go out there and just clean somebody's clock just by, are you going to, bait with your hands down the whole fight? Okay, cool. Overhand right. Sit down, young man. And in this case, it would be sit down, old man, right? And we've seen Josh take these big shots. Is that replicable over time? History says it's not normally replicable over time, right? It's like it starts to see that bill come due. And I do think that for Josh, he was preparing to fight Giga Chikadze. Probably did a lot of rounds on the feet, right? Probably got in a lot of sparring and whatever. And I think now he's going to be thinking, as long as I defend these takedowns, I'll be okay. As long as I defend these but I don't think that Bryce Mitchell is just a complete mark on the feet. I think he can go out there and scrap. I think he's an old country boy that'll throw down in the pocket a little bit. And I think if he does that here, he might be the beneficiary of Josh Emmett just going through two hellacious wars where Yair Rodriguez basically kicked his ribs into, a floating puzzle pieces set. And then, the subsequent bout, he gets his, just over and over and over chin checked by the jabs, the right hands. Ilya was just painting a masterpiece with the boxing. The fact that his corner didn't elect to throw the towel, the fact that the referees didn't stop the fight, it's like, I don't think that did him any favors for this one, honestly. So for me, I don't see this one ending well for Josh, and I would be leaning towards the ITD for Mitchell, because I think he could take him out with strikes here potentially as well. So that's just the way I see this one. I have bet Josh Emmett before. I bet him against Cater. I picked Cater by split decision in my article, and then I bet on Josh Emmett. So nobody could even come at me on that one. I was like, I covered all my bases. You can't even say, oh, it's a controversial split. I was like, I knew it would be.
Yeah, I was on Cater in this spot. I thought
and that was bullshit, dude. You did deserve the win. But yeah. I just knew that I was like, Josh Emmett's the kind of guy that like he gets in these close decisions and they love the guys that throw these huge one shot that changes the round type of guy. But I think after his knee surgery, bro, I'm not sure that he can create those same huge moments. And also people forget like the Shane Burgos fight was an absolute blood and guts war. And Shane has never been the same. I'm not sure Josh has ever been the same. Like that's my opinion, man. I feel like they both have just poured out the jug a lot at the altar of athletic glory and just being, badass fighters who stand in the middle and exchange. But like, there's a reason why champions and guys that stick around for a really long time, they try and avoid that because the more damage you take, there's no give backs. There's no, paying for absolvences. Like that, the damage incurred is just incurred. So that's something I'm thinking about this weekend. But did you have anything else you wanted to add on that fight, or should we move to the next one, my man?
No, I'm good, bro. I think you pointed a good point about the KO of Bryce. I think especially his ground and pound. Remember how he pounded Edson Barboza on the ground? That was nasty. Like Edson
it's like a 30-25.
Yeah, he's hard to finish on the ground, Barboza, right? But if he's spamming this type of ground and pound and going for the sub against Emmett, you don't want the decision prop at plus 100, right? You want the ITD, so I think that's a good spot.
Fair play, my man. I love it. Next up, we've got the talk of the press conference. Besides the main event, two guys that were going at it. Paddy the Batty Pimblett taking on Tony El Kukui Ferguson. Fascinating matchup. Oh boy, this one seems to be getting the best of both guys, right? They both seem to have a fire lit under them, but one guy a little bit closer to that athletic prime, Paddy Pimblett, taking a year off here to nurse that injury that he suffered in the Jerry Gordon fight. That was in the very first round there. Hurt his ankle, like messed up the ligaments there. I actually didn't realize that at the time. But I had said before that fight, I thought they were going to rob Jerry Gordon on the cards. If it was even remotely close, and I do think that it was a close fight that probably should have went to Jerry Gordon. But if it's probably and not certainly, and you don't leave no doubt, I think it was very close on the significant strike numbers as well. You just know that they're going to tilt the way of Uncle Dana's cash investments. But I think that when I'm looking at a fight like this, man, it seems like Tony is at least more mentally present than he's been for his other recent performances. I do think he's offered more, constructive analysis of his own career in these recent press conferences and interviews. But my man, I'm a little worried for him just based on the youth, based on the fact that he's been fighting guys. The last 6 fights that he's been losing, the average age of those fighters was over 34 years of age. Now he's fighting a 28-year-old here in Paddy Pimblett. So how do you feel about this matchup? What do you think about Tony's chances?
Yeah, I don't like his chances in this matchup. I know people hate Paddy now because he got a lucky win, a lucky decision in his last fight. I think that's the first time Gordon lost a decision. Also, he was 11-0 in decision before. He's not an easy guy to win a decision against. And you mentioned a good point about the age, but also about Paddy getting injured in his last fight. I think that's important to mention. He was not fighting 100% in this spot. And yeah, the problem with Tony is one of his best weapon was his durability, and now that's not as good. Like, he took a lot of damage because of his style. Like we just talked about Josh Emmett, right? It's kind of the same for Tony Ferguson. Like, he goes out there, he give it all, and the Justin Gaethje fight really changed him, and that was like bad. And after that, you can see that he was not the same fighter. So yeah, I really think that he's washed. Like, that 6-fight losing streak. I know the fight that he lost was against good competition, and in the Oliveira fight, Dariush fight, he has shown to not want to tap and good durability. But dude, like, getting submitted by Bobby Green, I think that's a bad look, if I'm being honest. Like, if Bobby Green can submit you, I really think that Paddy can do the same. I know people don't see the submission for Paddy. They think it's going to be a KO. I tend to lean it's going to be a sub in this spot. Because let's say Paddy rock him on the feet, what is Tony gonna do? Is he gonna just stay against the fence and get KO? I think he's gonna try to defend. I think he's gonna try to wrestle or something, and then the sub's gonna come. Paddy has some slick BJJ. I think that he has good BJJ, but he has decent power on the feet. The problem with him is the way he leaves his chin right up in the air. Right, he's gonna get cracked eventually, and Tony still have power, so maybe he get a KO and you retire. I hope so, but I had to bet Paddy ITD in this spot. I got plus 100 and plus 115, just because like I want to fade Tony again one last time and by finish, because now he's getting finished against guy that are not good finisher. Like, Bobby Green is not a good. I mean, not to say he's not a good finisher, but he's not a guy that tend to finish fight. And a submission by Bobby Green, that was a bad look. The sub, I mean, the fight versus Nate Diaz, that was a terrible look. Like, terrible. He looked completely washed into this fight. He looked a little bit better into the Bobby Green fight. Like, he dropped him at some point. But yeah, I think Paddy is gonna finish him in this spot. Like, people want to make a case for Tony. He looks good in the press conference and all that, but I think that's true. He's in good shape, also to mention, but again, it's not going to change because the reflex that he used to have, the reaction time in the cage, it's not there anymore. He's not as fast. He doesn't react well to punches, and he doesn't have the switch that he used to have. Like, he has a weird style, but because of the weight of the speed that he had, and also his reaction time, he could do some shit like that. But now, since he's too old and too slow, it's not working as well anymore. So yeah, I think Paddy is going to finish him at some point, unfortunately.
Yeah, man. I've heard a lot of people making the case for Tony, and if I hadn't heard everything from the interviews and stuff this week, I would have thought they were insane. But I do think he's shown like a little bit more seriousness, a little bit more focus. Seems like he really wants to be out there this week, whereas some of the fight weeks in the past, I wasn't sure that that was the case. But when you look at Tony, I don't know that I'm forcing here, right? Like I have only faded Tony once, right? I took Charles Oliveira plus 145. That was like the greatest bet of all time, right? I only took it for 2 units because I'm an idiot, but I should have taken that
Good
for
bet,
50
brother.
units, right? Yeah, thank you, man. But at the time, it's like, what did you note in your breakdown after the Gaethje fight? Everything was different, right? And who did he fight immediately after Justin Gaethje? Charles Do Bronx Oliveira. I was like, no way, dude. At plus 145, I have to have that. And you look at that fight, and I thought that the writing was a little bit on the wall there because he got so easily out wrestled. And earlier on in his career, he had been out wrestled before, but he was always creating violence from the bottom, right? And I thought he was so defensive in that fight. I felt like he had really, gotten a lot of that offensive intent beaten out of him by Justin Gaethje, man. Because in the second round of that fight, he lands that big uppercut. That was still somewhat competitive at that point. But by the end of round 3, I thought that fight was like the writing was on the wall. By the end of round 4, I'm like, man, they're really going to send him out there again. And it was just harrowing to watch, bro. If you remember, no crowds, right? Just silent. So you're just hearing, and every time it's just thwack, thwack, like it's a heavy bag, dude. Justin Gaethje is like loading up full power shots from like this far away, like, and just unloading. And Tony stood there and took it all. He is a gangster of the highest order. But I just think that is unsustainable, right? And like you mentioned it, his whole career, he's been in these blood and guts wars, man. Lando Venata has him on the ropes. Like all these guys have had him on the ropes. Guys that aren't, UFC Hall of Famers, guys that aren't, the best fighters out there. And then some that are, right? He's fought a real Rolodex of great fighters, but 3-5 in his UFC career to the knockdown on the official stats. Not great, Chief. Since 2016, 0-3 to the knockdown. So I know people talk about he landed, a shot, dropped somebody. The official knockdowns, that the ones that the stats are being counted officially, 0-3 in those last fights. And so for the eye test, he's still got some power, right? And if you listen to Patty break down this fight, that's what he says. He's like, the only thing that I see from Tony Ferguson that he still has left is his power. He's like, so I have to keep my chin tucked. He's like, I got to fight smart here. I got to be safe in that regard. But what he said was, I'm not afraid to bleed. I'm not afraid to get cut. I want to go out there and make this a one-round war. And when I'm listening to Patty, I kind of believe him, right? Because you look at how he's talked. He's been incredibly consistent in the lead up to this fight. He says, I want to make it like my debut. I want to shut up all my haters. I want to go out there and be the first guy to ever finish Tony Ferguson in the first round. And that, guys, is something you have to think about. Patty has talked about this is a lose-lose situation for me, right? He says, I don't have an upside here because if I go out there and lose, then I'm a bum who just got finished by the guy or just got beat by the guy who's on a 6-fight losing skid, right? But if I beat him, then I just beat the guy who's washed and was on a 6-fight losing skid. Like, where do I win there? He's like, it's tough for me. So what is the one claim to fame? Nobody's ever finished him in the first round. I think that is what Patty is going to try to do. I think he is going to try to speed run through Tony Ferguson. Now, to your point, do I think he's like the world's most sophisticated striker, the best striker? No. But I thought against Luigi Vendramini, he showed that when he is hurt, he reacts like an animal and just swings back for the fences. And I think that when you talk about why 28-year-olds are so much more likely to win in fights with 39-year-olds, it's because of their ability to react to punches, and we've seen examples of Patty get hit, clipped, rocked. Yes, but he's normally reacted very well. And the thing is that Tony used to be able to react well when he got hit, clipped, rocked, all those things. And he used to roll out and do all the things to survive. I don't see him being able to do those things anymore. We've seen some examples of him turning his back when he's hit, which is like the biggest no-no in boxing, right? You that are a defenseless target. You can't see the strikes coming when that happens. So I do worry about Tony because I think that his mind is clear. And I just don't know that we have seen an ability for people at 39 years of age to get it back physically, right? And when you take that damage, when we've got the book Fightnomics here that says over the age of 38, you're so much more likely to be knocked out. I do think that this is probably going to be a Paddy Pimblett knockout. I do think he is fully capable of submitting Tony. I do think he's the better grappler in this matchup, plainly. But I also think that, when I look at a guy like Tony at this stage of his career, I think the guy who's more likely to win by knockout is Paddy. I don't think Tony is completely out to lunch. I don't think he's got a 0% chance. But Paddy said everything I wanted to hear this week. I want to be aggressive. I want to finish him in the first round. I want to go out there and get a knockout and stand over his unconscious body. These are quotes, right? Like, I'm not making shit. These are all things that he said. And he said, Tony pissed me off. He said all these things about me when he didn't have to. He said, I've been nothing but respectful in the lead up. But if you want to make it aggressive in that, then fine. Then that's what we'll do. And I think that the only way he loses this fight in all likelihood is to get clipped on the chin, to your point. But he said, I'm going to go out there and keep my chin tucked for all you armchair analysts out there and show you guys all the improvements I've made in the year off. You've got one guy who's on all the steroids in the world, in my opinion, who's been training with Jekka Saragi and J-Flow Judo and all these guys trying to improve his skills in all areas of the game because he's been out of the cage. And I do think that that is a recipe for getting better. Whereas I think working with David Goggins and going back to your old team and stuff, that's a recipe to get the fire back. But I just don't know that it can bridge the gap for a modern MMA fighter against a guy who, his best days were several years back, and he's been on the wrong end of a few very serious knockouts. And let's just be frank for 1 second, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this either. He was having serious personal life incidences outside the cage as recently as May and June of this year, DUIs and things like that. Am I trying to make light of that? No. But am I saying that that's something I don't want to see for a fighter before they're in an important cage fight? Yeah. And so I think that a lot of this is about getting Tony's life together, making sure he's in a good place and he's got a goal and he's striving for something. And I think that's great. I'd love to see Paddy make a nice speech after saying, hey, Tony's going to win his next one. And, we wish him the best. He's going to fight at UFC 300 and all that. But I just think that right now it's Paddy's time. I think he's a cash cow for the UFC. And I think he's probably going to go out there and get the win and the finish. So I'm glad to hear that you agree with that, my brother. I've had my second thoughts this week just because I'm like, man, Tony does seem a little more lucid, a little bit more with it. But I think that's because he's quit alcohol, honestly. And I don't mean to make light of that either, but I'm not sure that he was sober for some of those, recent fight camps. And I think that he probably is now. But again, he's going to be 40 years of age in a few months. So, that's that. Next up, guys.
I didn't know the Paddy interview that you mentioned. That's very good to hear, Liam. So good points on that. I think that's everything that you want to hear. You said it basically. So I'm gonna trust you on that, of course. But yeah, that's the KO can be there. I just prefer to play the ITD just because I'm confident. I'm very confident that he's gonna finish him. But I think the KO and sub is kind of tricky. But yeah, very good points, bro.
Thank you, my man. And, this is the kind of situation as well where I'm perfectly comfortable being dead wrong. It's something that is like a penchant of my betting style, but I normally am betting big plus money. That's the way I roll. If it hits, God bless. If it doesn't, I'm going to try and hit big plus money again next week because it pays for itself over time. That's my style. But it's also, I do acknowledge the upfront risks, right? I'm never going to tell you this is a lock, just go bet everything on this. Not how we roll here, but I do think that this is a potential value spot on a guy that's a fan favorite, that's definitely attracting some betting attention this weekend. And, maybe they're going to get the win and I'll take my hat off to him and clap for him. But I just think, if he gets knocked out and it looks obvious after, then everybody's going to have to say, hey, sharp bet. So we'll see how it goes. Next up, Shavkat Rakhmonov. The only person I've ever used the word lock about is Shavkat Rakhmonov by sub against Neil Magny. I hope y'all took the coins when they were there. That was a great bet. And also just, I thought it was such a path of least resistance, such an obvious way for him to take the fight. And also just, I thought the edge in the grappling was here to here. I was like, if Shavkat wants the sub, he gets the sub. And if you remember, he actually lets Neil get halfway up and then just sits back to the guillotine. That was so clean and fundamental. I love Shavkat forever for that. They limited me on FanDuel sub prop openers for getting that one, at a pretty good price. But in any case, we're now looking at a fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, not an easy man to submit by any means, right? And I don't think that Shavkat Rakhmonov applies this weekend. He is fighting a guy that has knockouts on the feet, that has these skills. But I think that Shavkat is one of the most talented prospects in the history of the welterweight division. So with that, set up, Drahvy, what do you think of this matchup, my brother? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think he's probably one of the best fighters in the entire UFC, bro. I'm very high on him. I think that, I don't want to go out there and call him a lock and then he get head kick cut KO, but I'll be very surprised, I'd say, if Wonderboy win this fight. His path to victory to me is not a knockout. I know people are talking about a knockout, but to me, it's like a perfect fight. Wonderboy needs to fight a perfect fight in order to win this one. He's gonna need to outstrike Wonderboy, not get caught, and not get taken down. Is that gonna happen at more than like a 20% clip? I don't think so. So Wonderboy still he's not washed. We talk about a 40 years old being washed in Tony Ferguson. The reason is he didn't take a lot of damage in his fights. So he's not washed, but he's not fighting a guy that wants to strike with him and don't want to wrestle, Like Kevin Allen, remember when he got him down and then he just stood back up? Shavkat's not going to do that. He's serious in his career, right? He's not a guy that he wants to have fun. He wants to have good fights, but he wants to stay undefeated. He wants to be a champion. He wants to keep his 100% finish rate. And man, I'm starting to get higher on Shavkat than Chimaev, bro. I'm gonna be honest with you. We have seen a little bit, not a downfall, but on Chimaev, right? He's winning decision now. He's slowing down in fights. He's getting a little bit hurt. They get a little bit wobbled and stuff. And I think that Rakhmonov fight versus Neal, I know people are talking about how he was getting hit a lot, but man, to get hit clean by Jeff Neal like that, he has a good chin. I know if you watch the original fight, sometimes he's suspectable to have a suspect chin, right? With the clip we have seen on him. But the Jeff Neal fight, people think that maybe because he didn't get him down, he's not going to get Wonderboy down. That's different, man. Jeff Neal fight was one of the worst matchup for Rakhmonov in the top 10. Jeff Neal, insane power, very good boxing, insane takedown defense. So he couldn't take him down, and Neal had power, good boxing, good speed, and he's durable, And guess what he did? He had kind of a war with him, but he still got the finish. He still got it. And even if he doesn't get the fight to the mat, he has the striking, he has the power. So I love that from him. But that's not going to be a problem to get this fight to the mat. I don't think Wonderboy has good takedown defense. And remember when Belal Muhammad was on top of him and spam him ground and pound and was looking like he was about to finish him with ground and pound? Remember that? That was scary a little bit. And Shavkat ground and pound, nasty. So I know the sub line is dropping a lot. It's close to plus 100 now, but I think he's very light for a knockout. So I don't really like the sub prop. It really depends on how he wants to finish this fight. He's gonna get a finish. I think he's gonna get a finish, but I think that Julius played a knockout. Did he? I think I saw that on Twitter actually for Rakhmonov. But
I think he did.
Yeah, right, huh? So yeah, I think his ground and pound is very, very good. And I think he can also clip Wonderboy on the chin, on the feet. So he's like for a knockout on the ground and on the feet, right? And of course, if he gets him down, he can submit him. It's up to him. But yeah, I didn't want to get too pretty, so I had Wonderboy in a not Wonderboy, excuse me. I had Rakhmonov in a parlay at minus 550 with Ian Gary at minus 250. Unfortunately, I lost this leg, so I have a straight 4-unit bet on Rakhmonov at minus 550. I don't mind that, but I also plays ITD at minus 175 to win a unit. Like I said, I don't want to get too pretty and lose money on a method, but with your style of betting, Liam, I'm guessing you're gonna have a bet on the KO for Rakhmonov here. Am I right?
So have I bet it yet? No. But am I gutted that I missed a plus 330 that I had my eye on? Yes, because now it's about plus
There you go.
290. So I'm going to wait and see. I'm hoping a little bit more love comes in on the sub. And listen, do I think that the sub is very possible? Sure. Absolutely. I maybe would consider playing the late round sub props. But when I look at a matchup like this, man, to your point, if Bilal Muhammad can, be eligible for a TKO, Shavkat Rakhmonov can punch a hole through your head. I think that people are forgetting how big he is. He's going to match the size of Wonder Boy. A lot of people don't do that. I actually bet 4 units on Wonder Boy at, I think it was minus 102 against Jeff Neal. It's the only money line bet I've ever placed on a Wonder Boy fight. Thank you, sir. But I just thought, I was like, I'm looking at one guy who's like beautiful movement, like Jeff Neal, great power, but like I just felt like he was going to be missing all night. And so I also bet the fight not to go the distance there. And the one thing I didn't like about that fight from Wonder Boy, in hindsight, is that he didn't go for the kill. Like he just lets people off the hook all the time. Kevin Holland basically just saw his own way out of that fight. I mean, he was getting beat up too, but he saw his own way out because his hand was broken. But to your point, man, he just literally, like, I don't know, calling that a fixed fight would be too far, but it's like they're friends. Like they've done tequila commercials together. They're buddies. They're both nice guys. I really believe that Kevin, like, just didn't try to grapple him at all. If you tried to grapple him, I think he would have had a lot more success, right? I think it was an obvious path to victory. He had him on the ground and then he just decides to let him back up, right? Is that because of the threat from Wonder Boy's armbar series off his back or something? Like, no. So I do think that when I look at this, styles do make fights, right? Shavkat went out there and had a war with Jeff Neal. But the reason being is like Shavkat has a very balanced MMA game, I would say. He's not the best striker in the division, maybe, but I think that he could compete with everybody in the division everywhere. And I think that in terms of like, does he have a skill he could lord over everyone in the division? I think that's the case, right? Because in this matchup, I think he's the much better wrestler. I think he's the much better grappler. I think he's the younger, fresher guy who could take more damage. And I think that when you're looking at a guy like Wonder Boy, we're seeing a little bit of regression. We're seeing, let's talk about the narrative, right? Let's talk about the context just briefly. He denied his fight last time out against Michel Pereira, asked for more money, asked for this and that. Do I think he deserves it all? Yeah. Was he right about all that stuff? Yes. I said as much on Twitter at the time. Does the UFC executive class care about what's right and wrong? God, no, bro. They are all in on you will shut the hell up and do as we say. So if you buck that trend, you get Shavkat Rakhmonov as your next dance partner in front of a big audience. Good luck. That's the way that this business works. That's the way that this company works. So am I saying that Wonder Boy can't win? No, of course he could win. But is he being set up for success? No, he's being set up for failure. He's being set up to get brutally finished by this Kazakhstan monster. So that way you stay in line and you don't ask for title shots and money off of not fighting. Again, not saying I agree with the morality play. It just is what it is. And so I think Shavkat, like I said, most dangerous prospect right now in the welterweight division. Very dangerous with it. Like you look at every guy that in the welterweight division, you can see Sean Brady. Maybe he's better than him on the mat, right? Maybe he could leverage that, but on the feet, Shavkat's way bigger and way more dangerous. Like you could pick that with anybody. He's got something to lord over them. So for me, Shavkat is the future. I agree with you. And I think he's going to want to keep that balance going. He's got, what is it? Let me pull it up right now.
17 KO, I think, right?
Exactly. He's got 9 wins by sub, 8 wins by KO. Maybe he balances that out. I think the one last point I'll make here is maybe he doesn't have the power to take out Wonder Boy on the feet. Although if Anthony Pettis, a career lightweight, can do that, then I think that Shavkat Rakhmonov absolutely can do that. But on the ground, is his ground and pound not top 5 in the division or in the division's history? I mean, he stands above people and throws shots that put them in coffins. Like it's insane, dude, because he's got the height, the leverage, and the length. So for me, he's just got all the tools to win this fight, and I think he's going to in devastating fashion.
I have a question for you, brother. Before we move on, who do you favor if Chimaev were to fight Rakhmonov, and how do you line that fight?
I think that that's probably the best fight that you can make in the sport. It's right up there. I think, like, in terms of fascination, I think that Chimaev is a better wrestler. So I do think that Chimaev could take him down in the first round, but I'm not sure that he could easily pass his guard. I'm not sure that he could easily work from there. So I think that the longer the fight goes, the more it favors Shavkat. I think I would probably make him a slight favorite. I think he's the bigger guy with better cardio, but it's not an easy fight for me to call. And I do think that Chimaev, last time out, I thought he was going to finish Usman, and then Usman did that drop down and he hurt his wrist. I really think that's what prevented him from finishing. God's honest opinion. Because my read on that fight was everything that had happened until Usman goes to the ground, and then he just never tried to finish again. So for me, hats off to him. But that I think is the most compelling matchup in the sport. What about you, brother?
Yeah, I also favor Shavkat, but I think we're never gonna see that fight, unfortunately. But I also will make him a slight favorite, maybe around -150 or something. But yeah, man, I will be so hype if we've seen this fight, but I don't think we're gonna, because Chimaev looks to be staying at 185 now. So yeah, we'll see.
I think it's a better division for him, honestly, because welterweight is starting to heat up a little bit. And I think that right now, the middleweight division, there's some talent up there for sure, but I do think that there's a lot of exploitable style matchups for him potentially, with a lot of strikers kind of correlating congregating. That's the word I'm looking for at the top. Shavkat versus Burns, Kolostrom's asking for. I mean, that'd be a great fight too, but nothing gets the juices flowing quite like a super fight, and maybe they can both get the belt before they do that. Who knows? But
Yeah,
next
Shavkat
up,
will knock him out.
oh shit.
Yeah.
There you go. My man is all in on the Shavkat train. I can't blame you, brother. With that being said, I want to just ask everybody, if you're celebrating Christmas, if you're celebrating Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you're celebrating, want to say happy holidays to you. Cheers. All I'm asking for this holiday season, drop a like on the video, hit subscribe for the kid. Make sure you come back, because we're talking about fights on this channel each and every week, and appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Thanks for spreading a little holiday cheer. Let's get some money for them presents as well as we go here. But we've got a great co-main event, so let us not delay. Alexandre Pantoja taking on Brandon Raw Dog Royval, a special guest to bring in as well. Our guy Zach in the back. We're gonna bring him in. Do you want to break this one down as well, or just the main event, my brother?
Oh, dude, I'm down for whatever. I just landed. My flight just got done. So I just saw you guys were live. I saw you sent me the link. And I thought, you know what? What's better time to hop in than the main and co-main event? But I got to be super quiet. I wish I could be a lot louder, because I got kids sleeping in the other room. So I'll let you guys get hyped. I'm just as hyped. I just can't. Hopefully you can hear it through my whisper.
You got it, dog. You're killing it. We appreciate you being here. So we'll definitely tag you in as needed here through this breakdown. But let's start it off with our brother Drahvy. What do you make of this co-main event? It's a rematch of a great fight that was, a few years back. They're running it again. And Pantoja now is the champion. Last time these guys were both hungry contenders. Now just one of these guys, a hungry contender. The other one, a defending champion. Fascinating fight. What do you think, brother?
That's a banger. That's easily one of my favorite fight on the card. And these two guys, they're not gonna have a slot. This fight is gonna be exciting. That they're gonna go for the kill, and it's probably not going the distance, right? With the way they fight, the pace they push, and yeah, I think at the end of this fight, we're gonna see a new champion. I was not thinking that at first. I'm very high on Pantoja. I think he's extremely skilled, very durable, and extremely dangerous. His back takes are crazy, and he has big power, right? So he has a lot of things. But I bet him against Moreno. He was around plus 180 or something. Now he's minus 200 against Royval in a rematch. When we look the first fight they had, I'm a big believer in rematches tend to go different. I use this strategy a lot in my approach. I used that against recently Makhachev versus Volkanovski. I said to people that Makhachev will get a knockout in this one. People thought I was crazy at first, because who was going to knock out Volkanovski, right? They just had a war. But I think when they rematch, especially you can say that Moreno and Pantoja, they both rematch, and the outcome was the same, right? I was on Pantoja in this fight. I thought that's a little bit different. But yeah, in this fight, when you watch the first fight, Royval was kind of breaking him. That's how I was seeing this fight personally. I think that if you add maybe 5 minutes, I think Royval's the one getting the finish in this spot. Now people coming at me a little bit on my post on Royval. Oh, Pantoja has never been finished. He's not gonna get finished. Do you know how many times he got finished and stuff like that? But that's not how it works, right? I know people like Max Holloway and Khabib that never got finished or that never lost a fight, but that's not the normality. Especially with the way that Pantoja fight, he goes at it. He's kill or be killed. He's very hittable, and he has the insane pace. But he does slow down in fights. We have seen that before, and he has like cardio bursts, if I can say that. He slow down after 5 minutes, but then he regain and he's good. You know, that's a little bit tricky. But I don't think Huevo's gonna let him like have his cardio back, if I can say that. I think his pace gonna be too much, and I love what I've heard about Huevo interviews. He was talking about he needs to be a calculated killer. I love that, a calculated killer, you know. And he was saying that before the Pantoja fight, he thought that nobody could out scramble him and nobody could submit him because he know how good he is on the mat, and he didn't think that was possible. But after this fight, he hit a big reality check, need to go back with his coaches, and then what I'm doing wrong, what I need to improve on, because he felt something on the ground. He was making too many mistakes because he thought that he could have thrown this type of mistakes, but not at the highest level, you know. So now you have a guy that is working a lot on the type of mistakes that he make, and he wants to put a masterclass. That's what he said, you know. So run back the last fight. He did a mistake. He gave up the back on the feet, right? Pantoja capitalized on that. He knows what he's in there for this time, and I think that he's gonna get a TKO or maybe even a sub at some point. I can see him hurting Pantoja on the feet. I think the body shot's gonna be a very good weapon for Royval. I think the knees are gonna be a good weapon also, and he has a very slick guillotine. I can see him hurting Pantoja against the fence with body shot and things like that, and Pantoja shoot a sloppy takedown, and then he gets submitted. Again, I bet Pantoja against Moreno plus 180. I think that was a great bet. But I think I thought when I rewatched the fight, first of all, that's a banger. If you've not watched this fight yet, go watch it back. That was a fun fight. But if Moreno pushed a little bit of a better pace when Pantoja was tired, and I think that he could have taken that fight easily. That was very close, you know. I can count on Royval to put a pace like that and get a finish. He's more dangerous than Moreno also. So I think at some point we're going to see Royval finishing Pantoja for the first time, becoming a new champion. If not, I'm confident to say that's going to be a banger. I'm confident to say that somebody's going to get finished. I also played on the 3.5 in this spot. So, yeah, new champion for the co-main event, and that's going to be a scrap. So I don't know if you guys agree, but I think we can all agree on the fact that's going to be a scrap.
It's definitely going to be a scrap, my man. I absolutely love it. Zach, we'll kick it over to you, brother. How do you feel? I'm going to keep mine close to the vest until it comes around to me.
Are you calling an underdog to become a new champion with me again, Zach, or are we doing it again?
Well, I do like the under 2.5. I think if this was a 3-round fight, this would be a no-brainer, right? And I don't think these guys are going to slow down. Thinking it's a 5-rounder. I think, Royval, no matter who's fighting him, you're going to have to fight at his pace. It's just is what it is. That being said, his pace is just a wrecking ball. It's like a tornado. Guy comes at you with everything he's got, and he's kill or be killed, and that's why people like him. And I think that's why he would make a great champion in the UFC as well. I was impressed with Pantoja's last fight, man. You give this guy a second on the back, and he'll take the whole round, right? Just like an Aljamain Sterling. So I think Royval's got to be really careful here to be able to stay his free-flowing self. Still do the things that he does, because that's what makes him such a great fighter. That's what makes him who he is. But just be cautious, not overly cautious, but cautious to not give up these positions and let Pantoja suck away rounds, because that's how Pantoja wins this fight right here, is controlling them from the dominant positions, man. I saw somebody post like that highlight the other day where a dude just went like from De La Riva to like the crab ride and just crab rides the dude in an MMA fight. So I haven't seen anybody else do that. I think Pantoja's super high level when it comes to the jiu-jitsu. I think he has a super great camp. I think he's the rightful favorite in this fight. And with all that being said, I think he's going to lose this fight, man. And I'm going to tell you why. I think as this fight goes on, it might not be the first round, it might not be the second round. I think Royval's live for a finish early. But I think the later this fight goes, I think we've seen Pantoja slow down in the past before, especially at that high pace. So, do I think Pantoja is going to get his back at some point in this fight? Yes, probably. But Royval survived it the first fight and then was able to put him in dangerous spots. If he just chills out a little bit with the scrambles, doesn't give up position, this is his fight to win, man. He's the younger guy. I think he's the more likable person for the promotion as well. And I think he's on a little bit of a momentum streak as well. That's the last point I wanted to make, is the dude's just coming in hot. And I think even Pantoja knows that. A little bit of a mutual respect. Like, when you lose to somebody, man, and you got years on years to think about that loss, it makes you a better fighter. So I do agree with that point you made. I think we're going to see those improvements here. And I'll stick with the under 2.5, but I like Royval in this spot, especially if there's no, favorites that lose on the main card. Wink, wink. I think that's a great spot, brother. So I'm with you. Yeah, I'm on underdog here. I'm on Royval. And let's get this money.
I think we're going to make it a UNAM panel on the dog, the raw dog, Brandon Royval. Now, listen, I'm a Pantoja guy. I have facts and evidence to back it up. You know why? Because the first time these guys fought, I bet Alexandre Pantoja minus 154. And I got the 1 unit back that I was looking for. But I'll tell you, I feel like that was playing with fire. Pantoja went out there. He got the win. He delivered like I thought. I just thought he's the better guy. He's cleaner with the grappling. And I've had great success betting Brandon Royval fights. I bet twice on the money line. I had him as an underdog for 1 unit at plus 190 against Kai Kara-France. Finished him there. I had the sub prop there. I called the exact finishing sequence in that fight. I said he's going to club him on the feet. He's going to guillotine him. He got him. That was back in 2020, I believe. So I've been doing this shit for a long time, and I have the write-up to prove that one. It's on Twitter. I retweeted it earlier this week. But in any case, I've been a Royval guy because I saw him on the regional scene. I'm like, man, it's a guy that fights like a bat out of hell. And from a competitive standpoint, we all that have competed, I think, can relate to this, but also just like if you've watched any martial arts for a long time, you could see the guys you don't want to fight are the guys that just push an insane pace the whole time you're fighting. Because when you're in that kind of fight, you're like, man, this sucks. Like even if you're better, even if it's going well, even if you're winning, the way that they fight makes it a horrible fight. So Pantoja, I thought in that fight looked way more uncomfortable than Royval. The problem was he was 10 levels ahead of him at the time. He was just too many steps ahead. Royval was too willing to invite risk. And so I feel like he made critical mistakes and he ended up paying for it. But to your point, I think Zach made a good point about last time out. He's able to get to the back and then the round's over. He's so good on the ground with the back takes. Against Royval, that was not true, especially early, right? He did get him with that back take in round 2, closes the show. But in round 1, I was getting scared because I was like, bro, he's not able to consolidate the back. He was on the back, lost it. Then he turns to turtle. He comes halfway up. He was able to get out from underneath. He was able to get back to the feet in round 1 after having his back taken. So I do think that Royval in that spot had some answers to the back take, got overconfident, and then gave up his back and got finished. And I think in this spot, he understands the assignment, in my view, which is he got to go out there. He's got to put some damage on him. He's got to use his length and his size. He's got a 2.5-inch reach advantage and a height advantage as well. Listen, Faultless says Royval is a wild pick. Not going to lie, 66% of the time, the first fight winner wins the rematch. That just doesn't mean the world to me, right? He's 33 years of age. We're in the flyweight division, and I think that Pantoja is a great fighter. Like I said, I had him last time, but I think that Royval is making improvements. I think he's got a lot of motivation. He's 31 years of age. He's the younger guy. He's the bigger guy. I think that in terms of what Pantoja did last time out, he was in a fight of the year candidate. But the problem with being in fight of the year candidates is it means that you're sacrificing some durability. It means that you're going out there and putting on a war, entertaining people, right? There's a cost that comes with that. And I do believe that Pantoja poured out the jug last time, gave everything he had to get the win. So can he do it again? Absolutely he could. but I think it's a lot more of a difficult ask, especially at a favorite price tag, a bigger favorite price tag than he was last time when Royval was a worse fighter that took a worse approach to fighting and had more reckless game plans. I think we've seen from him the last few times out, he's been more careful. Now, if I was to try and bet this fight from the Pantoja point of view, I think that he was having a lot of success last time out with his hands. And I do think that getting a minus 190 favorite, at plus 475 to win by knockout in a fight that's minus 500 to end inside the distance is not mathematically correct, right? I do think that Pantoja has a submission path, but to your point, Drahvy, most fights that we see that are rematches, we don't often see them go the exact same way. So could he take his back and submit him the same way like everybody thinks? Yes, but I think that the way that this could play out differently than people are seeing it is that, number one, we could see Pantoja go out there and diddy bop this guy on the feet. I mean, most guys that fight Royval have landed cleanly on him on the feet at some point or another. He tends to come in with his chin up, throwing a lot of big shots. He likes to invite risk, right? So sometimes that gets him clipped. And I did think Pantoja landed a lot of good shots last time. But to the points we made before, I thought that was also exhausting him. He tends to throw with a lot of power, commit to his shots big, and that is a taxing style. Same thing with the dynamic scrambling and all that. It's all great. It's great, prolific offense, but it also comes at a cost, which is that it's very hard to continue to do over time. I think Moreno was a little bit complicit in those, exchanges that just ended up stagnant. Whereas I think Royval he has an attitude of not being stuck on bottom and saying, fuck it. Like, I'm going to keep rolling. I'm going to keep moving. We always say in the sport of wrestling, bottom is an attitude position, right? You have to just commit to saying, I'm not going to get held down by this guy. He's not going to hold on to me the whole fight. Like, I'm going to keep working my way back up no matter what it takes. And I do think he's going to have that kind of mindset in this fight as well. Like, I got to make sure by any means necessary, I'm not giving up my back, I'm not getting choked in the same way, but that could open up other offensive opportunities. So I like violence here more often than not. But I do think when you look at a flyweight fight, when you look at a guy like Pantoja who just found a way to grease the fight to the distance last time out, the goes the distance numbers are pretty big here. But I think it's either going to end under 2.5 or it's going to go the distance. You know what I mean? So I kind of like that as the angle here, as opposed to paying for a really chalky fight doesn't go the distance here, minus 500 or whatever, and then you're kicking yourself in the fourth round. I think you'd rather find out in the early going, is this going to be the same kind of fight where they fight at a frenetic pace? And all past indications are that it absolutely will be. So I'm expecting a banger just like you are. And I think that I'm expecting a new champion as well. But for me, Pantoja, last time out, hit a perfect win condition, right? And I do think that a lot of people are expecting he's going to be able to do that again. And I just think there's a lot more variance at play in this matchup. I think that a guy like Royval doesn't let you have an easy fight.
Yeah, and when people are all on the same side, Pantoja, easy money, he's going to submit him again. That's when you have these type of upset and people don't like that. That's the spot. I feel
he's from Colorado, bro. He's not a New York guy.
I feel like we talk about this fight together, and I feel me and you kind of have a hedge over the bookies on this one, just because the way they see this fight. I think Pantoja by knockout is a wide line. I was looking Liam into fight and by knockout, kind of doing your strategy on this one actually, because like I said, I don't think it's gonna go the distance, and I don't think it's gonna end the same way. So if Pantoja win, I don't think it's gonna be a sub, guys. I think it's gonna be a knockout. And I think Royval's going to knock him out if he wins, but the sub is live. So fight end by knockout is around plus 150. I was hoping to get like plus 200 to bet him, but I don't have access to plus 200 myself. And also, Liam, you mentioned it, but Royval and Pantoja fight, what these type of fight bring, like bangers, but also high volatility, like always, because of the way they put they put themselves in danger because they want to fight. That's fine for us as a fan. But like you said, you bet Pantoja last time. That was a good bet. But also you was like, hey, do I really want to relay the chalk again at minus 200 in these type of fight? I don't think it's a good idea myself, actually. I'd rather be on the plus 160. And then I know that it's going to be a scrap. They're going to go at it. But I know that it's going to look closer than that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to address a couple of the comments here, because we always say we got the sharpest chat in the game, so I want to address a few things that they said. Number one, is Royval a New Yorker? No, he's from Colorado. number two, do I favor Royval sub more than Pantoja sub? No, I think that would be insane. But what I do think is that if you put me in charge of bookmaking this fight, I would probably, I'm just giving the game away, but this is like my honest opinion and off the top of my head, right? I'm not looking at numbers or whatever, but like I would probably go 250 and 250 on the Pantoja win conditions. I know he's more prolific to the sub, but like I saw the last fight. I saw him tagging Royval on the chin a number of times, and I know that Royval can be, had that way. When I'm looking at, in terms of, I just lost my train of thought completely as I went back and forth tabs here. But in terms of Royval by sub, I wouldn't make it plus 800, right? Like I would make it like plus 500 because he's a prolific submission artist himself. He constantly hunts submissions. So it's not easy to submit a guy like Pantoja. It's extremely difficult. But I also believe that the only people that would do it are guys that create madness that could hurt him on the feet potentially, which I think this could create volatile, engagements on the feet. But also you have to be willing. You have to be confident enough to attempt it. And this guy is. He is a madman. He will attempt violence in every way that he can on Pantoja. So I think that if they get in a crazy scramble, like it's not out of the realm of possibility that this guy Royval could submit him. But more importantly, if he hurts him or if he tires, those are the two ways that I see him having a path to the sub, which is last time out, Pantoja got on his back and he was looking tired at the time he got the finish. So I do think there's a non-zero chance that we could see this guy Royval gas him out a little bit, get the finish. And then you know what? They shake hands. He says, hey, you're a great guy. I'm glad that you got the win back, but I gave you the rematch. You give me the rematch. Let's do it again and find out who's really the best. That's how I see this going. I think we're going to get a trilogy. I think that's what the flyweight division is all about. And to answer this question, who would you favor in a rematch between Royval and Moreno? I'll tell you right now, Royval. I would favor Royval right now. I think that matchup was not quite indicative. He got slammed on his shoulder. Like, it's just kind of a weird matchup. You know who else got slammed on his shoulder? Joe Piper against Dustin Stoltzfus. What do you guys line that in the rerun? I don't know. But for me, I think that I probably still favor Joe Piper to win that one. So I just think I want to see, a great scrap here. But I do think a lot of people are saying, like, this is only this way or this way. And I'm like, I never view a matchup like that. I think in a sport this volatile, anything could happen. Has there ever been two belts that changed hands on the same night? Yes, I believe there's been 3 title fight changes in the same night. The night GSP won the belt. If my memory serves, I'd have to go back and look at that, but I believe that's the case. But in any case, we've got a welterweight main event that is getting more and more heated by the minute, brother. We've got Leon Rocky Edwards, one of my guys, one of the guys that made me a lot of coins along the way, taking on Colby Covington, a guy that I have gone to the well with before as an underdog, brother. It did not go my way, right? I did not come up aces against Kamaru Usman, but I took him in that rematch, that ended up playing out as a decision, right? And it was like plus 275 or something. I thought he fought, pretty close, but overall, I just thought he didn't have the strength and the physicality to compete with Usman. I think that's the bottom line between those two guys. What was the difference maker? Kamaru is just a bigger, stronger guy and could compete with him in the cardio. So, can't take him down, can't out wrestle him. If I can't do that, then I've got to outpace him on the feet. I've got to leverage my kickboxing skills. And we saw that Kamaru was able to do a great job of landing the bigger, heavier shots in those fights, kind of jacked up his jaw, busted up his face. And I think that what we saw from the Leon and Kamaru fights is a completely different matchup. Shout out to our guy, Zach, for the dono, brother. Appreciate you big time, my man. If he's not on the show dropping knowledge, then he's in the comments dropping donos like a boss. So appreciate that, my man. But when I'm looking at this, I say to myself, Colby Covington, clearly very skilled, right? He's got a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's training at MMA Masters. He's a guy that's put in a lifetime in the combat sports game. So do I get why he's like in this position? In some ways, yes. But if this was a meritocracy, if this was a real sport, there's no fucking way that Colby is fighting for this title right now, in my view, because of the lack of activity, right? Because of the shit that's going on outside the cage. He's having claiming brain injuries and shit in court. Like that for me, mildly concerning. The guy can't finish the sentence, mildly concerning. However, the things that are positive from a narrative standpoint, it's like freaking Trump's in the building. He's wearing the Trump suit, all this stuff. Like it does seem like a layup in some ways. Like they're trying to set up this guy for a coronation. Oh my God, the American Revolution has commenced again. They just saw the big pop that Sean Strickland got. They kind of play politics a little bit in the UFC. Just is what it is, right? You could like it, you could love it, you could hate it. It's just an observation, right? If you don't see it, you're not paying attention. But they're a very political organization in some ways. And I do think that you can see that by the main card. You can see that by some of the structuring of this fight card overall. And I think that this is a fascinating fight because I called Leon Edwards being the first guy to take down Kamaru Usman in the UFC, which, by the way, Colby Covington did not do that, right? He went out there, he had, 50 minutes basically, never took down Kamaru Usman, came close a couple times, couldn't get there. Leon Edwards took him down, flat backed him into the mount. You could say element of surprise, but also they fought before, and Leon had done well in the first round of that fight way back in the day. So Leon, I think, has made steady improvements over the course of his career. You do watch the guy that got beat by Usman that first time. I picked him to win the rematch. It did not go the way I thought, right? I thought it was going to be, a Leon. I think I picked Leon by sub, right? Like club and sub. He instead head kicks him. The head kick heard around the world. But I thought that he left a little bit to be desired there, frankly, right? It so much so that I did not bet him in that rematch in England, right? That was foolish. I should have taken the plus money there again when I had the chance on the money line. But the reason I didn't take it was just because I thought the wrestling was pretty one-sided after round one. I thought his cardio was breaking a little bit. I thought he did get the benefit of the referee separating them when maybe that was not, by the rules. What should have happened there? He probably should have just been stuck to the fence. But for my bankroll, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Separate them again if I need it, right? But when I'm just looking objectively, I'm like, man, I kind of got a little bit lucky with that separation. Now, him being the better striker, I said that going in. I thought he had the power and the finishing upside, these things. But you got to just call a spade a spade. It was still lucky enough to cash despite the big plus money odds. So I thought, this could be a close enough fight, but they're probably going to rob Kamaru on the judges' cards if it goes there anyway in England. But he ended up winning it fair and square, right? Clean as a whistle, did a great job of controlling the wrists, C-grips, right? Just preventing him from connecting two hands together. That made a huge difference in the wrestling and the grappling, I thought. But I also just believe that a guy like Colby wrestles different than Usman. Usman does not have knees. He's mostly looking to be like physical leverage, strength, pick you up, slam you, do shit like that. That's how I normally used to get people wrap behind him, pick him up, mat return him. And Colby's not really like that. He's more so like finesse. He's trying to out wrestle you technically. And he's also a dog on a bone to get back on top. There's been a number of times he got swept. He got rolled over, out of position in fights. And he just rolls back to a single leg, gets on top, rolls into a front headlock. The guy goes to guillotine him. He's on top. Like I've just seen a number of times. And I know from my own experience, sometimes when you go against guys, even if they're pretty decent grapplers, like they'll start to think they got a good spot and then you're just back on top, and for wrestlers, that's what we're always looking at. It's like, once you start transitioning to grappling, you're like, man, I can use these opportunities to wrestle again. And I do think that Leon has good, clean grappling. I think he is a real serious grappler in his own right. But sometimes he's taking time to think about it. He's like looking off to his corner. He's asking for advice. That's my only concern for him here is like Colby is pretty instinctual with his stuff. And I did think the most aggressive we've ever seen him from a submission hunting standpoint was his last fight against Masvidal. I did not think there's ever been another example of him so aggressively hunting for the sub all fight. He's beating him up. And I think they might have registered one sub attempt. There's 50. But the one that was close was the one that made Masvidal like sit to his butt and bail out. And he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who hadn't been submitted since Toby Amada and Bellator, 20 years ago. I'm kidding, but like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that this is a fascinating fight, man. I haven't gotten the best beat on this one all week because I've been going back and forth. I think Colby making it personal, probably not a great idea. I think that Leon is probably the more dangerous guy between these two. But I also think that people are under some impression that like Colby Covington is like not a 170-pound man that can still punch you in the face. Like Nate Diaz rocked this man, like Leon is still a human being. He's been hurt. He's been wobbled. So I think Leon, more dangerous guy. But I think he's in a tough stylistic matchup and he goes from being a big dog in his last two fights and thought there was great money opportunities there, but now he's a favorite. So I don't feel as compelled to bet it. How do you feel, brother?
Yeah, to be honest, I was kind of hesitant on this fight at first. I went back and forth a little bit. Ended up with the dog on Colby. I think that, yeah, I think that he's the side, bro. Let me explain you why. You talk about Liam being a little bit chinny. I think that's something that people don't put too much attention into, but he was getting rocked by, yeah, Nate Diaz rocked him, and then he kind of choked the fight. But also, you remember when Brian Barbarian got him on skates like bad? People want to forget that. But he's a little bit chinny, Edwards. Not to say that Colby's gonna knock him out and he has power and stuff, but Kobe throw a lot of volume. You can expect him to work a lot for 5 rounds. He's built for 5 rounds. And like I said, a lot of volume. A lot of volume mean a lot of punches in the face, you know? And you know that he's also going to shoot a lot of takedowns. And you also mentioned the fact that Usman and Colby's style of wrestling is not the same. That's important to mention because Colby doesn't really care if he doesn't get you down the first time. He's going to shoot again and again and again until he gets you down, right? And he has the cardio to do it. We talk about chin. Colby chin is maybe not as good anymore. He took some damage against Usman. We've seen him getting dropped a little bit more now. So Leon is definitely live for a knockout. But I think this fight's gonna go the distance personally. So if it does, I have to favor the guy that has better cardio, wrestling upside, more volume. Because Leon is a good striker, is very technical, has some power, but he hammer his work a little bit. Like he's low volume at time. And I think that Colby's going to put him on the back foot and he's going to put a lot of pressure on him, back him up against the fence, shoot takedowns. So Edwards definitely got better with his takedown defense. You can see that. But also just to consider, Usman in the last fight, people talk about he was not 100%. That was a quick turnaround after the KO loss. And you could see that he was a bit hesitant, Usman. He's a guy that is very confident. And if you watch just the fight before that, like he was confident in himself. He was dominated the fight. Expect the first round he was not dominated the fight, but before that he was dominated the fight. You know, he was confident in his ability to get the fight to the mat. He didn't look as confident to me in the fight after he got knocked out all cold. It's probably normal, right? He just got KO brutally. You don't want this to happen again. And every time you see the head kick coming, you're like, oh, I don't want this again, you know? But Colby is a very confident dude, and I think that he's very confident he can get this fight to the mat. I didn't really like what I've heard in the press conference, but is Colby getting into his head? That's another thing to mention because we have seen Leon get break a little bit mentally into fights. We have seen broke a little bit, and I think he's someone you can get into his head. He's very mad about Colby. He wants to go for the kill. To me, it means two things. Maybe he's gonna get a KO early, but is he really gonna like throw more punches and gas himself out a little bit more? We don't know. But if he gas himself out early, what's gonna happen late? I can count on Colby to push the fight for 25 minutes. I'm not worried about that, but I'm worried a little bit about Leon cardio. I'm worried a little bit about his chin. Not in this particular matchup, but is there a scenario where Colby kind of wobble him on the feet? I think so. I think it's possible. Barberena knock him down. He's that like I mean that Nate Diaz doesn't have power. He's a volume guy and he's still rock him at some point. My worry, Lee, I'm gonna tell you, is in the clinch. I think Leon in the clinch with the elbows and the knees, he does a lot of good work. And Colby's kind of edible in the clinch, and I can see Leon clipping him with a knee or an elbow and getting a knockdown. So that's my problem here. And the head kick, so the head kick is there for sure. But yeah, I think that I just trust Colby a little bit more in this fight. The layoff worried me a little bit. Leon is bigger. He hit harder. He's the cleaner striker. I think it's a close fight. It should be line or close to a pick 'em. So I lean with the dog here. I bet Colby. So if my bets are correct, we're gonna have two new champions come Saturday night. But the good news is I only need one to profit. So yeah, Colby for the win.
Yeah, man. I tend to think that Colby is probably the money line side here, because he's the underdog, because it's a closely lined competitive matchup at welterweight, and ABCs, they always bet on cardio. And I do think that he probably has the superior cardio. This is not going to be at elevation, right? Where I do think Leon suffered from that a little bit, but I also think the part that goes unrecognized is that Kamaru suffered from that a little bit as well. A guy who typically has lights out 5-round cardio thought he was trying to coast. Trying to coast is a real dangerous thing because the fight is 25 minutes, and that left Leon an opportunity to get the win. But I'm looking at this and I say to myself, Colby doesn't really have much coasting in him. That's not his style. His style's not built for that. Even against Masvidal, he did get hurt on the feet at one point, but he also hurt Masvidal on the feet a few times, buzzed him a couple times. And Colby just doesn't have great finishing instincts. But I also believe this is another matchup where grudge match, a lot on the line. I think both these guys are going to be looking to pursue the finish, and it's welterweight, right? You got two guys that have gone to the decision a ton. This is the last fight of the year for the UFC on the calendar. I have a feeling somebody before 25 minutes is out is going to get this done one way or the other. And I think people won't expect that. But when I'm looking at it, I just say to myself, why is this not minus 200 plus to go, to decision when you've got two guys that have both started round 5, religiously over their last contest. And the only one that didn't is the Bilal Muhammad eye poke incident for Leon, right? Every other 5-round fight basically he's been scheduled for starts round 5. And I'm just thinking to myself, you got two guys here that both have completely different styles as well. Yes, Leon is competent on the ground, but his style, his preferred method is always going to be to strike. And then for Colby, he wants it to be wrestling, grappling, spin cycle against the fence. So for me, those conflicting styles could definitely lead to a finish here as well. And you're getting pretty decent plus money for two welterweights, and for Colby, let's say everything was bad about Colby. It's I think that covers the worst incident of Colby. He just comes in unprepared or whatever. But I also see Leon is the one who's got to travel more here. Leon's the one that went from having it in his backyard in England to now flying over to Vegas for a different style matchup where he doesn't have 2 fights prior to familiarize himself with that exact style of wrestling, grappling, exactly what he's going to be dealing with. This is a whole new matchup. So a whole new ball of wax. I'd put it a lot closer, to a pick 'em as well. But there you have it, guys. A hell of a damn card. We had a special guest appearance from Zach. We had a bunch more bombs dropped by Drahvy on the show again this week. And we had a lot of great input from our very sharp chat once again. So thank you all for contributing in the chat. If you guys have more to say, make sure you drop that in the comments section below. I'm excited to see what you guys have to say. But let's hear where you could find more great work from Drahvy, our great guest today. Thank you so much for being here, brother.
Hey, thanks for the invite, Liam. It's always a pleasure to talk fight with you and the sharp chat as always. So always fun, man, especially for the last card of the year. Hey, thanks, man. So yeah, if you want to find me on Twitter, Drahvy_. As always, I have my Linktree link in my bio on my Twitter. Also, I opened a dub club. So if you want to subscribe to, I know most people used to like my breakdown when I post in-deep breakdown on Twitter. I now have my dub club that you can subscribe to. So you have in-deep breakdown for every bet that I place, and every bet, of course, as soon as I make them. And also, you guys know that I have Be the Line broadcast, the show that I'm doing with me and the boys. We're 3, me, Key, and Pegasus. We just opened the YouTube channel, so we're always going to be live every Wednesday. So if you want to bless us with a subscribe on the YouTube channel, Be the Line broadcast, it's also linked in my bio. Will be a pleasure. It will be a pleasure because it's always harder to start the YouTube, But yeah, thanks, Liam, for having me again. It's gonna be a good card, and I hope we both cash a lot of money.
Heck yeah! And guys, I think that I like to have people like Drahvy on the show because he comes on and he's very transparent with his work, but also he's been doing this third-party tracked. He's got his record that he keeps, and I just really respect the breakdowns, the analysis, the tape. He just seems to have a very good grasp of everything that's going on. So if you're interested in more of what he's got, it's all linked down in the description box below. Really appreciate you making the time, my man. And I'm going to take the closing moments of the show today to just say, guys, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas if you celebrate, a Happy Hanukkah if you celebrate, Kwanzaa, New Year's, whatever is coming your way. Just want to wish you guys well for the holiday season with your families. And best of luck on this card tomorrow. Last one of the year, but not the last content piece of the year. We're going to have more on the channel coming up. So make sure you get subscribed if you're not already. And that's all the good tidings that we need. But The most important thing is God bless you all. Best of luck on all your bets. And until next time, come back and we're having all the same fun again. Good luck on this last pay-per-view. Let's kill it.